Yo, what's up guys, hope you guys are doing good. So today we are gonna see what if Kushina and Mito falls in love with Naruto movie. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Katy Muhle, link is in the description, and also subscribe to our channel and like this video. So let's get into the video. Thunder shattered the ominous islands in the air. A forest littered with trees was assaulted by harsh rain. Wildlife was nowhere to be seen, hidden in the safety of natural shelter. The figure stood in the middle of a gargantuan clearing, which was damaged with a visible hole in the middle. Broken and burnt trees cleared the vicinity. The figure wore a cloak, his true identity hidden by a white mask decorated with circular patterns, 2 holes at each side, intended to provide space for eyes, and 1 hole above them. He held in his left hand a baby in a pink blanket, cradled securely, as if the child's safety was very important. Supported on his right shoulder, draped like a sack of potatoes, was a red-headed woman. Her body was bloodied, scads of red lines streamed down her legs, her midsection, her arms, and her head. She seemed dead to the world. The masked man looked to the ground as rain continued its assault. He had remained silent for what seemed like hours before. Finally, he spoke. "You were very impressive, Minato. In my planning, I had failed to take your sacrifice into account. It was neglected on my part." The figure looked around, taking note of the copious amounts of destruction. The land looked like the aftermath of a war. Well, they had indeed been at war, both won and lost. People had died, extinguishing their lives, also their village could continue to live off them. To use them to prosper itself into a strong entity. What rubbish, the masked figure thought. He looked down again, staring intently at a spot as he continued his talk. "As Hokage, you have made your village proud and succeeded in cementing yourself as their legacy. But as a father and husband, you have failed your family. In the end, you chose the village over your own children." The man was replied by rain splatter and the occasional roar of thunder, nothing else. He sighed to himself. "All you have done is postpone the inevitable. Konoha will fall, no matter how much you fought for your selfish ideals." The man looked at the baby in his hands. It was a girl, enclosed by a pink blanket. She had been crying a few moments prior. But now, she slept soundly. That was good for the masked man. He did not need any unnecessary crying. The silence was much more welcomed. "Shut your eyes to the world, for when you truly open them again, a new world of peace will greet you." That was his ultimate goal, and it was becoming more achievable each second. "Your death was unfortunate, Minato. However, I will not be deterred. This world shall know true happiness and peace, and I will use any means to achieve this. One day, you'll understand and come to forgive me." The masked man turned his gaze lightly, eyeing a blue blanket that was slowly getting soaked. There was a bundle in there, but he made no move to help it. "The child will be my instrument to Konoha's destruction. The demon feeds off of rage and anguish. What better way to fuel a boy's anger than a mother's betrayal?" He briefly turned his gaze to the woman on his shoulders, her face hidden on his back. "Yes, she will be instrumental to true peace." The man's posture stiffened. His ears could pick up distinct footsteps driven by urgency. He could hear people converging on this very spot. Soon, the place would be filled with unwanted visitors. He had wasted enough energy as it was. He could not stay here. He made to leave, but decided to give some parting words. "Do not worry, Minato. I promise that Kushina will not be harmed, nor will her little girl. They will grow to love as a family and return to your village. That is the most I will give you. They are important to my mission, however, so I cannot just leave them be yet." He took a quick glance at the baby boy again. "The boy will be left to this village's disposal, your village. They may grow to love him or hate him, but all will be the same when the child reaches the right age. Your family has a great task to perform. I hope you're proud. I bid you farewell, sensei." And with that, he shot into the trees, swiftly camouflaging himself with the accustomed darkness. The clearing was silent once again. The baby lay motionless in the wet blanket. Beside it was another body, bloodied and prone. It was a man, his blonde hair mashed with blood, and his shinobi attire was incalculably tattered. His eyes were open, gray, and lifeless. He was dead. Everything seemed too still for just a moment. The rain had stopped. Then, the clearing was flooded with bodies, moving swiftly with a purpose. They were all dressed in shinobi attire. One body in particular landed next to the dead blonde. Quickly, the man boomed, "Get this man medical attention, now." Many ninja acted out, hurriedly taking the blonde to an unknown location. The man who gave the order looked on forlornly, dread already painted on his face. He had seen eyes such as those many times before. He didn't want to believe that their leader was dead, not yet. He looked down and noticed a wet blanket on the ground. His eyes widened in terror. Fearfully, he picked up the bundle and cradled the baby in his hands. He took off the blanket, took a dry cloak out of a scroll he wielded, and placed it around the infant. He quickly felt the baby's chest, applying a small amount of chakra to heal any unwanted injuries. The baby was cold to the touch, but he could feel the faint heartbeat of life. He froze mid-stride. It was only for a few seconds, but he finally realized how grim things really were. He looked around, already knowing something else was amiss. Search for Kushina and the other child. If you see the man that calls himself Madara, inform me immediately. Yes, sir. Sarutobi. An alarmed voice called. Sarutobi looked to the voice, witnessing a man with spiky white hair making his way to the clearing. Jiraiya, I fear we are too late. Jiraiya froze, his face shocked. He shook his head, stern. We lost a lot of good people, I know, but is Minato okay? How about Kushina? Are the kids alright? Sarutobi took a deep breath. This day made him feel truly old. They had lost a lot of innocent people because of Kyuubi's surprise attack. It was horrible, loved ones were lost all because of the masked man claiming to be Madara. Knowing that the village might have also lost not only a Hokage, but a good friend as well, really tore at Sarutobi's psyche. We are searching for Kushina and Mito. I have Naruto. But Jiraiya, I don't know if Minato made it. What do you mean? Jiraiya yelled, enraged and scared. This is Minato we're talking about. He single-handedly beat hundreds of shinobi. Jiraiya, Sarutobi forced, face contorted in sadness, where did Kyuubi go? Jiraiya paused. He looked to the side, his face was grim as realization hit him hard. He closed his eyes and spoke. He told me that if all else failed, he would use the Shiki Fuijin, oh god no. I applied chakra to Naruto. The seal is there. Jiraiya's mind shut down. His body slacked and he fell on his butt numbly. His face was a mask of horror. He didn't know whether to cry or just scream in rage. I feel the same as you, Jiraiya. It was an unfair fate that robbed Minato and Kushina the life of a family they deserved. And it was an unfair fate that so many lives were lost because of something we were not prepared for. Kushina, where is she? Jiraiya screamed in alarm. They are still searching for her, Sarutobi reminded. He understood Jiraiya's hysteria. The man was already in the process of grieving from one loss, he didn't need another. That bastard, Jiraiya hissed. His eyes were red, he was livid. When I find him, I'll make sure he pays for what he did. Calm yourself, Jiraiya. Right now, we need to focus on tending to our fellow shinobi. We will deal with that man if he shows his face again. Damn it. Jiraiya screamed. Why now? Why when things were starting to look up for them? After all the shit Minato and Kushina had to deal with, why this? Jiraiya. Sarutobi commanded. Calm yourself. Jiraiya stopped his rant and glared at a tree. It wasn't fair, it just wasn't. Sarutobi looked at Naruto. We have to help the Kushina and Mito are okay. You will have your time to grieve, just wait for the rest of the news. We need to know how much damage has been done. Jiraiya looked at the child too. Poor kid. Yes, it's very unfortunate. What are we going to do? If Kushina is alive, we will trust Naruto's care to her. But if she's not. She is. Jiraiya protested, standing up on his 2 feet once again. I'm not saying that she's dead, Jiraiya. But we have to be prepared for anything. Jiraiya crossed his arms and grit his teeth but let his mentor continue. If she is dead, then I have to put the child into an orphanage. I have little choice but to do so. I'm certain that the council will opt to it and wait for Naruto's adoption. Jiraiya sighed. Are you sure it's a good idea? It will be like Minato again. If you're willing to look after him, I can leave him with you. Jiraiya's mouth thinned. He looked troubled, not sure if it was the right decision to place a child in his care when his spy network was so active. I don't know. I don't want you to give me the kid and I end up neglecting him. He could die in my care. I'm always busy. You know I'd love to be there for him. But right now, there's just too many things going on. Are you sure, Jiraiya? As long as the kid's safe in Konoha, then there's nothing I can do. When things calm down, I'll be here and ready. That is, if Kushina. I understand. You have an obligation to the village. If we were to lose your expertise and your spy network, Konoha wouldn't stand a chance against invading enemies. Jiraiya nodded, although he seemed apprehensive in agreeing. Yeah. Don't fear, Jiraiya. Naruto will be cared for. So what are you going to do about this situation, Sarutobi? I will wait for Kushina's arrival. Only after that, I'll make a decision. If she's really dead, I will inform the village of her and Minato's bravery in protecting Konoha, and I will make sure that they are aware of Naruto's sacrifice for their safety. Jiraiya nodded, satisfied with what he was hearing. It's going to be a shocker when the village finds out that Minato and Kushina married and had kids. Sarutobi shook his head, face serious with little effort. They won't know the identity of Naruto's parents. It's for the child's safety. If people were to find out that Minato had a child, then enemy Nin would surely come for him. Jiraiya's posture deflated. Yeah, I guess you're right. Sarutobi suddenly smiled gently. Relax, Jiraiya. I'm sure Kushina and Mito will be found soon, then it's all up to her. It will be hard for everyone, I'll admit, but as long as the children are safe, I'm sure Kushina will look after them and remain strong. Jiraiya allowed a tired grin. Yes, Kushina would be found and he wouldn't need to worry about Naruto. It was okay. Everything was going to be okay. I need to take Naruto to safety. Go on searching for Kushina and I'll catch up, Sarutobi said, swiftly hurrying in the direction of Konoha. Jiraiya nodded, going deeper into the forest. After he found Kushina, he would need to see Minato anyway, if only to pay his respects and grieve. It shouldn't be that hard to track down the Redeed. If anything, she should still be around the area. The clearing was empty again. No one could be seen and the ominous silence returned. It was deathly quiet. It was a dark night on the streets of Konoha. Civilians and shinobi alike were making their way to their homes to rest and converse with family. The lights that had originally lit the grounds of the village were eventually snuffed out by workers. They were sure that no one was around the darkness and made their way home as well. Konoha looked beautiful, covered in different shades of darkness. Everyone appeared to be indoors and it appeared that nothing eventful was fated to happen. Suddenly, a shadow dashed from one building to another. It would occasionally pause, then move swiftly again. It continued to move habitually until it finally stopped at a dead end. There was nowhere else to go. The shadow shook. It hid itself near trash cans. It waited minutes before it moved and looked around in trepidation. No one was following it. It stepped out of the darkness of the buildings and into the illuminated light created by the moon, revealing itself to be a blond boy wearing a white t-shirt and black shorts. The boy held his chest, sluggishly walking to a fence that was linked between two buildings. His heart was beating erratically, he felt like he ran a marathon, maybe he did. As soon as he was able, he put his back to the fence and fell in a heap on the ground. He was dirty, sweat seeping through his cheap clothes. His eyes were bloodshot, dry tears streamed down his face. He looked absolutely horrible and tired, breathing heavily. He removed his hand from his chest, choking back a sob when he witnessed what he was covering. Blood. His shirt was covered in it. And it was his. He wiped his face of any tears and snorted with the front of his arm, he didn't even know why he bothered. For a long moment, he looked up, staring dazedly at the moon. His face was lost in confusion, hurt and betrayal. Thinking a few moments back, he couldn't stop fresh tears from gushing out. He made a valiant effort, covering his face with both hands and wailing softly. But he could not hold it in, it was too much. So he started crying harder, angry tears burning his eyes. He cried and cried, hoping to run out of things to cry about. But in the end, it was all useless. No one would aid him. It was as if he was invisible to the world. No one bothered to give him a second glance. He knew that if he died, then he wouldn't be missed at all. It was horrible for a 7-year-old child to have such thoughts, but life was cruel and living it was crueler. He continued to cry. He cried until his body could take no more and promptly fell into a restless sleep. Two figures, pitched on a nearby building, watched the scene with indifferent eyes. They had seen what had happened and that's all they did. To any stranger, it would seem cruel for a mother to try and kill her child. But this child was an exception. He was special and because of that, the Anbu currently watching him didn't bat a sympathetic eye. Naruto Uzumaki once started. If I had just come into Konoha, I would have been fooled and actually think the boy was normal. Normal or not, the other replied, Sarutobi wanted us to keep an eye on the boy. Sure, but at least that's all we have to do. We are to inform him of anything alarming as well. Do you think this counts? What, his adoptive mother stabbing him? No, I don't think it's significant. He can heal himself. That's Naruto for you, always the special one. Yeah, the special demon brat. That was all they exchanged. They remained silently again, watching as the broken boy cried in his sleep. It had been 2 months since he had found himself on the streets. Naruto felt lifeless every day. It was always the same routine. He would wake, realize how filthy and alone he was, and would start walking around the village, aimless. If he bumped into any civilian, he would just be glared at, but ignored. They all ignored him. No one gave him the time of day. At first, he was hurt that no one seemed to care about him. But soon, it was just a common sting. When he was ever hungry, he would need to sneak around, dig through rubbish bins, and find leftovers of meals that tasted rotten and terrible. He had grown accustomed to his new lifestyle quite quickly, fueled by the desire to live another day, to hope for another day. It wasn't long ago when he had a mother who treated him so lovingly. She showered him with affection and always comforted him when he found it difficult to make friends. He loved her with all his heart. And she tried to kill him. Even now, he was still shocked with what she had told him. That fateful night was not the only moment she had tried to take his life. She had poisoned his food before, cursed him to death over and over. How could a mother, who showed so much love to him, be so cruel? He felt his heart shatter into pieces again and felt every shard pierce harshly into his chest. She broke him, she really did. She hurt him in a way no one else could, and she probably felt little guilt for it. No one would hear him. He could tell the whole world of what that woman did to him, and no one would care. Maybe Sarutobi would do something about it, but Naruto doubted the man. He may have come off as friendly, but he had hardly contributed to anything Naruto could think of as worthwhile. He looked around his boxed shelter. He had run out of food again. He would need to get more or risk starvation. He would never result in stealing openly. If anything, the villagers would kill him if they saw. He had a gut feeling that the villagers were waiting for him to slip up in anything he did. They were looking for excuses to get violent, he could see it in their eyes. Although they never made a move to kill him, their intentions were still pretty clear. He folded his box and hid it under a few bins. He was careful to conserve anything that could provide protection, by any means, against harsh weather. The last time he had been careless, his shelter was stolen from him by bullies. He will never forget that freezing night for as long as he lived. He searched through a few rubbish bins he was closest to. He found plenty of newspapers. That was great, it would provide him heat if he ever needed it on cold days. Now, he needed something for the rain. Living on the streets had taught him a few things about surviving. He had adapted quickly to the harsh reality, carefully making sure that the villagers were oblivious to his activities. He didn't need them coming and taking away his necessities. While they had things to indulge themselves in, he needed everything he found just to survive. He walked cautiously to the entrance of the alley he called home. He had to time this just right, or he will be discovered. The smell of his clothes might pose a problem, but he had no choice. Once he saw an opening, he quickly walked out of the alley and into the buzzing crowd, expertly passing each civilian without so much as being touched. He weaved through them like a maze, carefully striding through the practiced routes with ease. He needed to get close to the market district. There, he would find important foods. Fruits and vegetables. Those were more natural and were easier to eat. He wouldn't have to worry about quantity today. If he was correct in his count, then today's stores would be stacked with fresh batches of natural foods, and bins will be full of the leftovers. As he drew closer to his destination, Naruto licked his dry lips. Finally, after weeks of downing morsels of meat and pasta that could barely fill a 4-year-old, he would finally be able to eat a full healthy meal. Sure, it was only fruits and vegetables, but his mouth watered at the thought. Once an opportunity came, he quickly darted into an alley next to the market district. He made sure to keep an eye on any villager who might have noticed him. No one seemed to be paying attention. That allowed him a sigh of relief. He made it. He looked in front of him, seeing a lot of bins lined neatly in rows on either side of the walls. They were packed with thrown-away foods. To anyone else, this was rubbish, to him, it was heaven on earth. He had to be careful though. He couldn't let his guard down for a second, or the villagers would discover him. Careful to remain silent and stick to stealth, he opened the first bin he came in contact with and took out tomatoes, carrots, mayonnaise, and peas. He carefully closed the bin and went to another. He took out apples, bananas, and other fruits he could find. After he was satisfied and had no more room to carry more, he scurried to the back of the alley, the darkness providing plenty of cover from any unwanted eyes. He sat down happily, struggling not to grin with his fortune. He would eat to his heart's content, but he would be mindful to save a few for later. Who knew when he would get another chance for food of this magnitude? He chowed down hungrily, biting and clawing at the food like a starved slave. He bared his teeth as he tore the food apart, hastily guzzling down everything his mouth could get a hold of. He didn't need to worry about the water supply. Konoha had outside taps all around, and one was just in front of him. Tears gathered in his eyes. He struggled not to cry. It was these moments that were the happiest and saddest of his life. They were happy because he could finally feel full in life another day. They were sad because these were the moments he was reminded of what he had been reduced to. A starved homeless child. But unlike other homeless children who were treated with sympathy, he was treated with scorn. He never understood why he was treated so differently, only that he was just treated that way. There were no explanations, like anyone would bother anyway. He burped committedly when he had his fill. It felt great to be full. Even though times would soon be tough again, he could at least enjoy this moment, however small it was. He got up and went to another bin. He would need food for a few days, and this would do. He rummaged for anything else other than fruits or vegetables. A grin tore his face when he found instant noodles that were half finished and still in the packet. Once he removed all that unwanted dirt, they'd be great to eat. Besides, he was used to hand-me-downs. Abruptly, he sensed his blares at him. He stood straight, unfamiliar with the feeling. It was as if something was calling him, warning him. He gulped in trepidation. Has he been discovered? He had whipped to the alley's entrance. No one seemed to pay the area any mind, too engrossed in buying their groceries. But his senses didn't stop. They told him to look harder, to find something. So he did. He squinted his eyes as he roamed every villager that passed by the place. He was about to give up, but his eyes locked onto someone and froze. It was a woman. She had long red hair and a beautiful face, partially covered by a hood. She wore a kimono and walked among the crowd with authority. Naruto didn't know why he couldn't take his eyes off her. She was just like any other civilian or ninja. She didn't deserve his attention. But then, she stopped and looked his way. When her eyes fixed on him, it was as if time had stopped. She stared at him intently, both in curiosity and confusion. He stared back, surprised that she had even noticed his position. He knew many villagers, but couldn't really place her name on his list. Was she new to Konoha? Had she heard to stay away from him? He mentally shrugged in the end. If she wasn't hostile, then he could move on from this like nothing ever happened. But she didn't move, she kept staring at him, more focused than before. Her eyes drank in his form. Naruto was confused with her fascination towards him. She didn't seem malicious, but she didn't seem kind either. Her eyes were calculating and, in a sense, cold. He must have been a means to add something to her apparently boring day. Naruto looked away. Let her stare. Let her scorn. He was used to it by now. No one could be trusted. She stared a while longer, still rooted to the spot. Then, her eyes widened and she looked down at something else. She smiled at an unseen source and gave a nod, finally leaving without a second glance. Naruto sighed in relief. Okay, he was used to villagers staring at him, but that felt different. He didn't comprehend the feeling, so he pushed it to the back of his mind and continued to work. The Hokage tower wasn't naturally busy today. Ninjas went in and out occasionally, sure, but that was just it. Nothing eventful happened, and the secretary to the Hokage had swiftly gotten bored with the mundane work. She continued to fill in paper, absent-mindedly dealing with guests without looking at them. Today will be no different. What could possibly happen? Excuse me, I am here to see Sarutobi. Do you have an appointment? The secretary boredly questioned. She didn't lift her head to address the guest. Honestly, she couldn't care less who it was. No, I don't, but I think he will make an exception for me. Look, the secretary started, if you don't have an appointment then you make one. No one is special around here, including you. Okay, I'd like to make an appointment. The secretary took out a pen. Name? Kushina Uzumaki. Well, Kushina. The secretary's eyes widened when she registered the name. She looked up in surprise, shocked to see the redeeted girlfriend of the yondaime. Kushina-sama. That would be me. I'm so sorry. I'll take you to Hokage-sama right away. The secretary squeaked. She felt immensely embarrassed for talking down on such a respected woman. Hell, she never expected to see Kushina, the supposedly dead Kunoichi, again. Thank you, that would be acceptable. The secretary scurried to her feet, making to guide the Uzumaki woman up the flight of stairs. She was confused, of course. She had so many questions she wanted answers to, but it would be disrespectful. Wait, Kushina said to the woman. She turned around and knelt on her knees. That's when the secretary noticed another redeed. A small girl, looking no older than 7. Sweetie, Kushina addressed softly, are you ready? The redeed nodded shyly, keeping her head down and her hands together. Kushina smiled and took the little girl's hand on her own. She looked at the secretary again. Suddenly, she wasn't cheerful anymore. You may take me to Sarutobi. The secretary nodded, surprised with the woman's cold 180. She led her up the stairs until they approached the 2 twin doors. Kushina-sama, I am so glad to see you again. We were all worried that you had died. Oh, you were you? The secretary nodded furiously. Yes, thank goodness that you're alive and well. It is fortunate. Now, allow me to talk to Sarutobi. Of course, my lady. The secretary bowed and opened the doors. Hokage-sama, you have a guest that requests your urgent attention. Please tell them to wait. I've got stacks of paperwork that's definitely more than I can handle right now. Hello Sarutobi. Sarutobi stopped in his tracks when he heard the voice. It couldn't be. He looked up, staring into the familiar face of Kushina Uzumaki. Kushina. He sputtered, rising to his feet so fast that his chair toppled over. It's been a while, old man. Kushina, is that really you? Sarutobi asked, completely taken aback with the woman in front of him. It was like a dream. She had disappeared 7 years ago, no trace of her could be found. It was a heavy burden on Sarutobi, who had to mark her as dead. If he hadn't, she would have been labeled a missing nin by the council. He thanked God it never came to that. But he would have never expected to see her again. Do you think you're free to make sure I'm really me? No, no, he hastily put it out. I know it's you, Kushina. There's no mistake about that. Kushina nodded gracefully. Sarutobi looked down, noticing another mop of red hair. Mito. The old man didn't know if fate was smiling at him, but he had never been so happy to see Mito ever since the day she was born. It was her alright, resembling her mother in looks, but not mannerism. This must be Mito, Sarutobi said kindly. How are you, child? Mito bit her lip. She looked to her mother and back to the old man. I'm well, sir. Sarutobi chuckled. She was such a cute girl. As nice as Sarutobi is, I'm afraid this visit is serious. Is it? Seriously? Sarutobi looked confusedly at Kushina. He had so many questions to ask her. He nodded and offered a seat to both his guests. Once seated, Sarutobi started. Where have you been all this time? All will be revealed soon enough. I want you to request a council meeting. What? Sarutobi queried in confusion. She just got back and she wanted a council meeting. Request a council meeting. There are plenty of things I feel I need to discuss with the aforementioned audience. But Kushina, you just returned to Konoha. I need to know what has happened to you. What have you been through? Don't you need time to rest? Kushina shook her head. Sarutobi wasn't sure which question she was denying to answer. It would be too long if I explained it to you and the council individually. Sarutobi still wasn't convinced. Perhaps you should rest first before seeing the council. There is no point, they will soon know of me and request my presence themselves. I want to beat them to it. Realizing he had no other choice, Sarutobi nodded his head. I will organize the council meeting immediately. Kushina nodded and stood up. Come, little one, let's go. Mito grabbed her mother's hand. Kushina turned her head and looked at Sarutobi again. I will be at my estate. Call me when the meeting begins. Even though Sarutobi was happy for the woman's return, something in the back of his mind was tugging, telling him that he was forgetting something, that something was wrong, but he ignored it. Now wasn't the time to worry about petty things. Kushina was home and that's all that mattered. He started writing. Kushina walked down the street of Konoha gracefully. She made sure she had a firm grip on her daughter's hand. She gazed at the villagers. Those who recognized her stood still with shocked expressions. Those who didn't stared at her curiously. However, her gaze was not that of warmth and mischief. Her gaze was callous and guarded. She acted like she didn't know them, any of them. It was as if they were all strangers to her and she'd like to keep it that way. Ah-chan, why are they looking at us? The young girl asked nervously, squeezing her mother's hand for comfort. Kushina squeezed back. Just ignore them, sweetie. We'll be home soon. The young girl nodded, but her apprehension had not left her. Kushina stared at the Namika's estate with a plastered frown. The place truly had seen better days. The place was big, with a decoration of shaded cream paint outlining each important section of the infrastructure. The structure itself still remained solid, but looked tarnished and old. Surprisingly, the gates remained unchanging, but were rusted from lack of maintenance. Kushina could only guess what the inside of her once proud home was like now. It wasn't as luxurious as before. But with time, that will change, along with everything else around here. She looked at the broom she had bought for this occasion. Mito mimicked her, staring at her own little broom that was purchased from the same store as her mother's. Kushina mentally shook her head when she noticed what her daughter was doing. She had told Mito that their home would need a little work because no one bothered to look after it. And she had been right, no one bothered. These people were one disappointment after another. And Mito, the girl, was adamant in helping her mother clean. Kushina had told her to let her do all the work, but her little angel wouldn't budge. Kushina fixed her face and scrunched up her sleeves. Okay, little one, let's get started. Mito nodded in determination, scrunching up her little sleeves as well. Right, Ka-chan. They started cleaning the large home. Kushina felt frustrated for underestimating just how far damaged the home was. She would need to get new beds, new lounge furniture, new cutlery, and just about everything else at home needed. Mito? She called while sweeping the kitchen. Yes, Ka-chan. Her daughter's faint voice replied. From what Kushina could guess, she sounded like she was in one of the bathrooms close to her. Remember to take out anything that's in a plastic bag. Don't touch anything else. Aw, but Ka-chan, I'm not helping. Yes you are, Kushina protested, now get back to work, little lady. And I still dust and sweep. Kushina paused to consider. She nodded her head. Sure, and make sure that's all you do. Fine, Ka-chan. Kushina could tell she was pouting, but she wasn't going to fall for it this time. Mito may be cute, but she had a devious side to her, one that Kushina will not be suckered to again. She put all the old clothes and curtains in a plastic bag, to think that those sorts of things could look so horrid after years of disuse. She took the necessary items outside of her house. She strode past the gate and put the rubbish in a few bins that were nearby. She looked behind her and noticed her daughter carrying her own bags approaching her. "Hey Kushina-sama." Kushina turned to the voice. It was a man, dressed in a standard civilian kimono, which was gray in color. Kushina was surprised that someone actually had the guts to approach her, but she hid it well. Raising a condescending eyebrow, she leveled her eyes on the newcomer. "Yes, that's me, and you are?" The man fidgeted on the spot, evidently nervous around the widow. He understood her impervious attitude towards him. After 7 years, she suddenly appeared out of nowhere with a child. She must have had quite a rough life before she came back. The man could only guess what horrors the Redeed experienced. "I was told by Shinka that you had arrived home in Konoha." "Shinka? Oh. He is the man that you purchased those brooms from. He is a very close friend of mine, my lady." "I see, and why are you here?" The man gulped. He had never remembered a time when he was actually scared to be in the same presence as the woman in front of him, but he felt an obligation to do so. Kushina was well respected around Konoha. She was legendary in her own right. Stories of her bravery to protect Konoha spread like wildfire for years. Every kunoichi looked and fixated on her and Tsunade in the same regard as mentors, and every shinobi respected her abilities, her willingness to lay everything on the line so that others could see a brighter day. She was their heroine to the very core of every villager. "Well," the man swallowed, "I saw that you were taking a lot of stuff out of your estate." "Yes, they are old and cannot be used in a healthy environment," Kushina said evenly. "Well, I will be honored if you could use my store's furniture to refurbish your home. We have all the necessities you need and we'll even throw in dining cutlery for you alone." Kushina hummed. "How much will all this be?" "Are you kidding?" The man gasped, wide-eyed. "For you, my lady, it's free of charge." "Really now?" "Yes, I can never hope to treat you like a commoner. You were together with Minato, so he obviously thought greatly of you." "Yes, I agree. If there is anything else you need from us, anything at all, please don't hesitate. We are forever grateful for all you have done for us." Kushina nodded and opened her mouth to speak but was cut off with the sudden poof of smoke. An Anbu operative was bowing before her. If it wasn't for the gravity-defying gray hair, Kushina would have never guessed the Anbu's identity. "Good morning, Kushina-sama. Your request for a meeting with the council has been granted. The meeting is underway and the council members await your arrival." "Thank you, Inu. I will make my own way to the council meeting." Inu nodded his head and swiftly left. Kushina had analyzed the man's behavior in those few seconds that he had been here. It was subtle, but Kakashi looked like he wanted to be anywhere but near her. Although she really didn't care, she found the behavior oddly suspicious. "Come, little one, let us get dressed and go." "Okay, Ka-chan." Kushina fixed the man an even look. "You may do as you will to this place while I'm gone." The man's face brightened immediately. "Yes, my lady. I will get everyone I know to spruce up this place. By the time you're done with your meeting, you won't even recognize it." Kushina nodded her consent, finding the man's excitement strange. "Let's change quickly, Mito-chan," Kushina said, grabbing her daughter's hand and going back into the home. The council room was buzzing with activity. People were talking animatedly, some shouting to stand out from the rest to make their point superior. Most already knew the reasoning for Sarutobi's summoning. News traveled like wildfire and only one significant rumor was going around. Kushina, former wife-girlfriend to the Yellow Flash, had returned to Konoha. The lot were still shocked that Kushina was indeed alive. Sarutobi marked the woman as dead. Whether he still knew of Kushina's existence, even after marking her death certificate, remained to be certain. "I can't believe it. I heard from a friend of mine that she went back to the Namika's estate. I still find it so hard to believe. How could that person be Kushina? She must be an impostor somehow." "Yes, she has to be. The real Kushina would never have a child that did not belong to Minato. They did have children together, or at least planned to. They were married too." "What? How come I never heard of this?" "Maybe because you weren't a member of the council at the time," one member scoffed at the other. Sarutobi sighed in his head. Did I really have to deal with these people every day? Damn, he was too old for this really. The room went silent when a poof of smoke appeared near the door. When the smoke cleared, all the council members felt like they were staring at a ghost. "Ah, you are all here, I see," Kushina said, cutting the silence with her melodic voice. Some people gawked at her, shocked to see the rumor in the flesh. "It really is you, Kushina," Kaharu said at last. "I don't know what to say." "It is alright, Kaharu-san, we don't need to talk longer than necessary." Kaharu frowned, confused with what she heard, but decided to still exchange pleasantries. "Welcome back to Konoha, Kushina. You were sorely missed. I am glad to see that you are well and healthy." "Thank you." "Is that Minato's Tsume cut in, trying to calm the tension?" Kushina scowled at the Inuzuka, actually forcing a confused frown from Tsume. Hey, relax, Kushina, I was just playing around. Not with my daughter. Okay? Kushina, Sarutobi addressed, please take a seat next to me. Kushina nodded and did as requested. She put her daughter on her lap. The little Redeed made a whine of embarrassment, but Kushina told her that there were no other seats in the room. Now, Sarutobi, Himura have started. I understand there are matters other than Kushina's arrival that need to be discussed. Actually, the reason I called you here was because it was Kushina's request. Oh? Kaharu breathed, turning her gaze to the Redeed. And how may we help you, Kushina? Help? Kushina repeated. No, I don't think that's what I'm here for. Kaharu smiled gently at her. It is alright, Kushina. Although we have a lot of questions on your activities for the past 7 years, we understand that you need time to adjust to Konoha again. Only after you are comfortable around the village will we start questioning. That is all good to know, but this meeting isn't about getting acquainted with each other, Kaharu. Kaharu's smile dropped. The way Kushina was acting, with her poise and eloquent mannerism, contrasted greatly to the obnoxious brat that Kaharu remembered all those years ago. Ah-chan, I'm sleepy. Mito said tiredly, rubbing her eyes in a feeble attempt to stay awake around boring people. It's okay, sweetie. I'll wake you when it's over. Mito nodded her head and placed it on her mother's chest. She closed her eyes, sleeping soundly. A lot of people found the scene cute. Kushina, Shikaku called, what is this about? Why did you request this meeting? Kushina looked at him. Simple, Shikaku, to tell you all that I'm leaving Konoha. The room's occupants blinked at her, confused with what they just heard. I don't understand, Inoichi said, shaking his head in wonder. You said that you're leaving Konoha. Yes. After you just came back. Yes. But why? I don't want to be tied to a village with bad memories. I want to move on from this. So is that why you never came back, because you didn't want to? No, I had other matters that I was dealing with. Such as? They don't concern any of you. But Kushina, you can't leave. Mibuki screamed from her stand. I mean, we've all been through some pretty bad things, but Konoha is your home. You fought for this village. True, I did fight for this village. However, I can't bring myself to stay here. Kaharu sensed where Kushina was headed and she didn't like it. Is there more to what you're telling us? Yes, I'm taking everything that I left here and I do mean everything. Kushina, another council member addressed, since you're technically dead on record, you are not signed to any village. We understand that the Kyuubi attack was harsh, your feelings of loss are mirrored by the village. Although we would love for you to stay with us, we won't force you against your will. Legally, you can leave if you want, but we implore you not to. Kushina put an elbow to the table, cupping the side of her face with it. She was mindful not to shake Mito too much. I'm glad you pointed out those things, because I'm taking every one of my husband's possessions with me. The silence that greeted her announcement was deafening. Sarutobi recovered quickly. But Kushina Minato was born in Konoha and died fighting for Konoha. Yes, another member cut in. If you want money, we will be more than welcome to give you a suitable amount, but you cannot take the Yondame's legacy away from this village. Things that belong to the Hokage belong to Konoha. You're wrong. As his wife, I am obligated by right to take whatever I please from my late husband. The scrolls, journals, and money. A member screamed in outrage, not to mention important documents that have helped Konoha thrive. Every last one of them. You can't do this. Tsume barked. Future generations use the past Hokage's experience and teachings to better themselves and this village. Information such as import and export of goods, marketing maintenance, and currency distribution are all documented by past Hokage. Then use their information. It is impossible. Tsume argued. Their methods are outdated. Trade between villages has changed dramatically since the first, second, and third Hokage. She is right, Kushina, Sarutobi said. I run my methods of trade through Minato's work. He was a genius, till the very end. Kushina rolled her eyes and fixed a glare to the members. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. Sarutobi has already admitted to memorizing what's necessary. So what's the problem? You're wrong, Kushina. Unfortunately, my age has caught up to me. I used Minato's findings to run the village, but I did not memorize them. I tried, but every so often, I need to read his journals again, as references. Kushina did not seem remotely sympathetic. That's your problem to deal with. Please, Kushina, be reasonable, Himura said. You're risking this village's very existence with what you're doing. Surely, you wouldn't want to harm these people, would you? Please, save your guilty measures for someone without a backbone. This village has nothing to offer me, and I will not be used as a puppet for your leisure. The hair ran a hand through her white hair. She was trying to keep calm, but was failing. Why are you doing this? Do you need the knowledge of Minato for something? Do you want to learn how he operated as a leader? Or is it to be close to your late husband? I'm sure we can come to some sort of agreement. Learn how Minato operated. I know how he operated. Everything that's in those journals and scrolls is already saved up in my head. I don't need to even read a page. Then why? They were Minato's possessions, and so, they're mine, simple as that. I don't think I need to justify wanting his things to any of you. Everyone was thinking along the same line. Who was this person? This wasn't the lovable, loud, idiot woman they remembered. No, this woman was heedless, objective, and calculating. Sarutobi could feel the beginning of a headache. He would have never expected something like this from Kushina, but it was happening, right in front of his eyes. People were starting to sweat. The situation could not be any worse. Right here and now, they were at risk of losing everything. Most of them knew that there was nothing they could do. They couldn't force Kushina to stay, because even though they could lift her death and threaten to label her a missing nin, she did not belong to Konoha to begin with. In the end, it would be Minato's marriage to her that would ruin them. The Haru's mind was thinking a mile a minute. The window was slowly closing for all of them. Kushina had them by the necks, all she needed to do was squeeze to kill them. I think that is all, Kushina said, deciding to end this now. She made to wake her child. Wait. Kaharu yelled. I have an offer for you. There's nothing you can offer M. A position as Hokage. Kaharu cut off. They were gasping all around. Are you mad, Kaharu? A council member yelled. You cannot seriously think that giving her such a post of power is the right decision in this situation. Think about it, Kaharu defended. She is well aware of Minato's way of operations. She can maintain this village's well-being, and the Yondame's possessions would remain in Konoha. Kushina fixed her gaze on Kaharu. What makes you think I want to stay here? Think about it, Kushina. You want to leave because this place brings bad memories, right? Kushina didn't reply. Kaharu continued anyway, saying. Why don't you stay and make better ones? You will have a stable home. You will be respected and your daughter will be assured protection from any harm. What do you think it would be like if you were not around and she was kidnapped or were somewhere else? Kushina did pause in her refusal when she heard that. Kaharu was right. She would have access to Anbu and her daughter would be protected all the time. As for education, Konoha offers the best education in all the lands. Your daughter's future would be secured here. The only thing we ask is that you look after Konoha as your late husband has. What makes you think I'm the right leader for Konoha? A moment ago, I was ready to leave. Because, if anything, you are fair, Kushina. I can see how mature you've become from the last time we met. Other council members started to discern what Kaharu was aiming for. Tie Kushina to Konoha by any means necessary. She had everything they desired. Minato's possessions and his legacy. Mito. To lose all that would truly mean Konoha's downfall. Now, obviously, there were risks involved, such as Kushina driving Konoha to the ground. But Kushina, albeit a little different, was still Kushina. She still cared about others, proof being how affectionate she was to her daughter. Kaharu knew that Kushina would be fair as a leader. She already was aware of how things worked from witnessing Minato countless times. She was strong as well, slightly higher than their most skilled Anbu, Inu. But Kaharu, another member cut in, is not nearly as strong as Minato. The man's skill was unmatchable, and his sealing techniques could never be measured. Who do you think taught him sealing in the first place, idiot? Kaharu rebuked. That shut him up swiftly. Hell, it surprised a lot of people how much they underestimated the Uzumaki woman. Kaharu turned her gaze to the members. Sarutobi cannot run Konoha forever. Kushina is the best candidate. She is skilled and has leadership qualities that this village needs. Her will of fire is strong, and we can be assured that she will not treat her late husband's home poorly. Members started to nod their heads, agreeing with the old lady. All in favor of Kushina as the new Hokage of Konohagakure. Every member raised their hands. Kaharu nodded, satisfied. It is up to you, Kushina. Kushina sat there and stared at each member in silence. She said nothing for a long while. They were patient with her, awaiting her decision, although some failed to hide their agitation. If she indeed decided to leave Konoha, then they would have no choice but to find a way to keep all of Minato's belongings, using any means to make sure those items never left their land. It would be desperate action, but they were prepared to fight, physically, if that was the case. Kushina tapped her daughter on the head. The girl opened her eyes, looking straight at stern eyes. She looked up at her mother tiredly. Kachan. I accept your offer. I will be your Hokage. The Haru struggled to keep her composure in check. She had won. Now, to cement that victory. As Hokage, you must swear the oath. I understand. Repeat after me. I, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. I, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. Do solemnly swear my life, my knowledge, my trust, and my protection to the fruition of Konohagakure. Do solemnly swear my life, my knowledge, my trust, and my protection to the fruition of Konohagakure. I will treat this village as my home. I will treat the villagers as my children, to look after, protect, and watch grow. I will treat this village as my home. I will treat the villagers as my children, to look after, protect, and watch grow. I swear my loyalty to my home. I swear my loyalty to my home. As your Hokage. As your Hokage. Kaheru smiled. She snapped her fingers and a secretary immediately appeared. You called, Lady Kaheru, the secretary bowed. Yes, a new Hokage has been announced. Please get all the paperwork ready. The secretary sputtered, a new Hokage who? Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. The secretary's eyes bugged out. She didn't miss what was said, at least, she was sure of it. The first time Kushina has been seen in years and she was already the new Hokage. Of course, right away ma'am. The secretary blurted out, completely bewildered by what she heard. She disappeared in a plump of smoke. The Murra turned his gaze to Kushina. All the papers are being prepared for you to sign. Your inauguration will be in 2 days. I hope you keep those words you said to heart because you'll be repeating them passionately in front of the entire village. Kushina nodded. If that is all, then I'll take my leave. Of course, Kushina-sama, and congratulations. We are proud to fully welcome you back to Konoha. Kushina allowed a small smile. I look forward to working with all of you. She grabbed her daughter and left the room. A lot of people sighed in relief. It was as if that was the closest they had come to certain death. Meeting adjourned, Kaheru murmured, her poor body struggling to cope with the copious amount of stress. Sarutobi had promptly left after the meeting. He hurried to catch Kushina. Kushina. Kushina wasn't that far. She looked back, regarding Sarutobi. Yes. He had finally remembered something important, very important. You're finally back, and you made quite the impact on the first day. It's a natural talent, I guess. So you will look after Konoha, huh? I swore an oath. You should already know that I never go back on my word. That is good to hear. But I'm surprised you accepted such ludicrous offers. I didn't think the offer of Hokage would sway your refusal so easily. Kushina turned away from him. Guess you thought wrong. Yes, I did. You planned all this from the beginning, didn't you? Kushina still had her back to him. Yes, it needed to be done. That is all I'm going to say on that. Sarutobi shook his head with a chuckle. I can't believe that you're the same Kushina. I'm not the same Kushina. I have a responsibility to my child, as a caring mother. Looking out for her secured safety isn't uncommon for mothers. And your son? Mito latched her hands to ears and whimpered. Kushina whirled and fixed Sarutobi with a glare. The man froze in place, surprised with the look. He had never seen Kushina colder than that moment. Her gaze chilled his very being. Son? I have no son. With that, she started walking away again, much more stiff than she had been before. Sarutobi blanched. What do you mean? Of course you do. He's. Do not bring up the subject again, she curtly added. Then, she was gone. Sarutobi was still rooted to the spot. He couldn't believe he had just heard those words from Kushina of all people. He stood there, for God knew how long, shocked to the core, confused, and lost. He didn't know what to think of her words. He didn't know what to think of her. He stood there. The sun rose slowly in Konoha. It painted the village in a different array of colors, creating a beautiful scenery for any villager to marvel. Workers started filing out of their homes, eager to continue their own endeavors and earn profit. Some looked on, already familiar with the imagery the rays created. To them, it was just another day. Kushina tossed and turned in her bed. The rays were touching her form from the window, but she tried to avoid them. When it became fruitless, she groaned and sat up. She got out of bed, making her way to her new dresser, fitted with a large mirror and dozens of accessories. She paused, realizing she needed to take a shower first. She went into her private bathroom. She did her morning routines. Showering, brushing her teeth, and using the loo. She got out of her bathroom. She looked at the new dresser again and approached it. She sat on a chair next to the dresser, she looked at her mirror, sighing at what she was seeing. Oh God, my hair. She took a brush that was on the surface and proceeded to brush her locks. She looked around, analyzing how different her room looked from 2 days ago. It looked brand new now, with a light shade of purple on the walls. She sniffed and was satisfied to smell clean air instead of the pungent aroma of drying paint. She had been surprised when she had come home with Mito, and hundreds of workers, from furnishers to painters, were happily walking away from it, proud of their heartfelt efforts in conditioning the Namikaze estate. Each had bowed to her as she passed. She knew that she was respected in Konoha, but the display of loyalty solidified the extent of what her respect and gratitude achieved. The gates, among other things, looked pristine and refined. Everything was carved and decorated with the utmost care. Their home looked like royalty. She was satisfied with their efforts but offered no thanks. She didn't know where each of them lived anyway and she wasn't going to go looking for them. She put the brush down, looking at her hair again much better. She stood up and went to her closet. She took out a bottle of lotion and lathered her body. Once she was done, she took out a white kimono. It was decorated with fine red lines by the sleeves and bottom. It was designed to enclose her chest area and retain her modesty. A red sash would complete the set. These were the clothes given to her by the council, a sign of her loyalty to them. She mentally scoffed, if they only knew. As soon as she was done putting her clothes on, she left her room and made her way down a few stairs. "Mito?" she called. "Yes, Ka-chan," the voice echoed. Okay, if Kushina guessed right then her daughter was still changing. "Are you ready to go yet?" "I'm almost done. I'm just getting the sash thingy on." "Do you want me to come help you?" "No. It's okay." "What's the matter, embarrassed by your Ka-chan babying you?" "No." Kushina stifled a laugh. "You're not a good liar, sweetie. Come down when you're done. I'll make breakfast." "Wait, I can help." Kushina rolled her eyes. "You don't have to help with every single thing. I'm your Ka-chan, let me do my job." Okay. Kushina nodded to herself and went into the kitchen. Breakfast had been quick to make. They were really running out of time, so to her shame, Kushina made ramen. Well, she guessed made wouldn't be the right word for instant ramen. "Okay, Ka-chan, I'm ready," Mito exclaimed, rushing down the stairs and into the kitchen. Kushina looked at her daughter and laughed. Mito pouted. "What's so funny?" Kushina struggled to stop. "I really should have helped you with that." Mito looked like a mess. The sash was tied incorrectly and her kimono was too loose. She looked like she had just woken up. The little girl folded her arms. "It was my first time, Ka-chan." Kushina smiled softly. "I know and I'm proud that you tried." Mito smiled. "Thank you, Ka-chan." Kushina went to her daughter. She fixed her kimono and expertly tied together her sash. After she was done, she rubbed Mito's head affectionately. "I love you. I love you too. It's you and me against the world, little one. Are you sure you can handle it?" "As long as I have you, Ka-chan, I know I can." "That's what I like to hear. Let's eat breakfast." They sat at their dining table. Mito looked in awe at all the cutlery. "That's a lot of spoons," Mito said. "Yeah, I'll need to teach you proper etiquette soon. So I put them out for tonight." "Etiquette?" Mito asked. Kushina smiled at her. "I'll tell you about it tonight." "Okay," Mito said, then she noticed the food. She leveled a look at her mom. Kushina smiled sheepishly. "We need to hurry, sweetie. Today's the day." "Okay, but next time, Ka-chan, please let me help you with the food." "No problem. Now, let's eat up." They ate breakfast together in comfortable silence. Konoha was buzzing with excitement. Lamps of disparate colors embellished the streets. Stands of foods and games were slowly being lined up. The day was a day of rejoice and the villagers were planning on it. This day would be dedicated to their new Hokage and they would celebrate immoderately. Preparations were underway. People advertised the inauguration gleefully, highlighting the wonderful day's events, water balloon fighting, knocking objects for prizes, and much more. Some obviously knew that they would get drunk with all the festivities. Before any of the fun could commence, they needed the new Hokage to be crowned first. So they all gathered at the Hokage tower. Sarutobi, Kaharu, and Homura were situated at the top. They had everything prepared. Sarutobi held his hat in his hands, awaiting to hand his former title to Minato's wife. He reflected back on the conversation he had with Kushina. He was shocked with her attitude concerning her son. She refused to even acknowledge she had one, and that was so confusing to the third Hokage. For one, Kushina had always been fiercely protective of the things she held dear to her. She had no life when she came to Konoha, losing her family, being a Jinchuriki, and surrounded by strangers. But once Minato came along, her life changed for the better, and she came to love him and this place. She always proclaimed how family was important. She told Sarutobi specifically that if she ever had children, then she would do anything to make sure that they were safe. So what happened? What was with the cold attitude? Was he the only one that found her behavior odd? Were these people really that blind? And Naruto, the poor boy. Sarutobi knew the child had it hard. He was no fool. He was well aware of how the village treated Naruto. But so far, at least, it was okay. The child was adopted by a nice woman. Sarutobi could sigh in relief at that. He looked on, troubled. Although Naruto was safe for now, he really needed to be aware of who his mother was, but that was the problem. "Are you sad about losing your position, Sarutobi?" Homura questioned, misunderstanding the man's distress. No, I am glad that I can pass on the title of Hokage. But? Kaharu inquired, raising an eyebrow at Sarutobi's pause. Are we really sure about this? Kushina is capable, of course, but is this really the right decision? It is the right decision, Kaharu put in, narrowing her eyes at him. It was a unanimous vote, with yours among ours. Sarutobi grimaced. Relax, Sarutobi, Homura said gently. I cannot think of a better leader than the wife of our late Hokage. Sarutobi didn't reply. It seemed that he was on his own. They had made up their minds a long time ago. There she comes, Homura announced. All the elders looked down, noticing the crowd clearing a path for two figures. Kushina walked at her leisure. She stared straight ahead, giving nobody else a glance. She watched as the crowd cleared a path for her. Well, she was sure she would soon be their new Hokage. Mito walked next to her, holding her hand throughout the journey. Everyone was silent as they watched them pass. They would cheer, but not now. Hidden behind a wall, Naruto watched the scene curiously. It was that woman again. She was what the crowd was fussing over. She was going to be their new Hokage. Was that why she came to Konoha? Who was she? Naruto didn't understand what unknown force drew him towards the woman. It was a feeling of familiarity, but he was certain that he had never seen the woman before. What was so interesting about her? What made him so keen to look at her? She wasn't special. She was just like all of them, a liar, someone who he could never trust. To him, she was just like any other villager. His stare turned cold. When Kushina made it to the top of the tower, she was greeted with the former Konoha squad. Welcome, Kushina, Homura bowed. Kushina nodded to them all. They began the process. It had been rehearsed prior to D-Day. And now, everything was running smoothly. Kaharu spoke to Konoha. She made a point to highlight the past Hokage of the village. She spoke of their bravery, their knowledge, their dedication, and most importantly, their will of fire. She praised their past efforts in shaping Konoha to what it currently was. She pointed out the history of the first Hokage and then moved on to the next until she came to Minato. Sad faces greeted her words. The fourth Hokage met an early demise. He didn't live on to prosper all the fruits of his labor, and a happy life was stolen from him. It was a heavy loss for Konoha. Then, she focused on Sarutobi again. It was brief. She turned to Kushina, giving her a nod of content, and then turned back to the village. She started talking about the Uzumaki woman, highlighting key points for Konoha to know. Her past as a refugee, her marriage to Minato, her duties to the village, and her sacrifice in the Kyuubi attack. All her efforts earned shouts of praise from the village. Kushina's eyes flashed in fury, but it was too fast for anyone to notice, and it was gone. Homura put his hands up in the air to silence the noisy village. They stilled, waiting. He turned his gaze to Kushina. It is time. Kushina nodded and approached Sarutobi. The man held an even stare, but she could see the confusion in it. She could see the inner turmoil playing out in the man's visage. Whatever was wrong with him was not a problem. Hello, Kushina, Sarutobi. Sarutobi, Kushina acknowledged. Before I bestow to you this hat, I need you to recite the oath with Kaharu. Kushina nodded, turning her attention to said woman. Kaharu smiled while saying. Repeat after me. I, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. I, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. They continued the oath like before. The villagers watched in rapt interest as the inauguration drew to a close. As your Hokage. As your Hokage. Kaharu allowed a tired grin and turned to Sarutobi. Sarutobi's mouth thinned, but he approached Kushina nonetheless. By the power bestowed on me, he placed the hat above the Redeed's head. I, here is in Sarutobi, name you, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, my successor. He placed the hat on Kushina. The crowd erupted into frenzy, screaming and shouting in happiness. Kushina walked to the front of the Hokage Tower's roof and addressed the people of Konoha. Thank you for your acceptance. I swear to you all, I will strive to maintain and strengthen Konoha so future generations can take pride in this village. Our will of fire will remain strong for as long as I stand. The crowd cheered again, louder and more vocally than before. Kaharu stood next to Kushina and addressed the mob. I give you all, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, 5th Hokage of Konohagakure. The celebration started in the afternoon. Carnival games were on display and everyone was involved. The streets were filled with dancing civilians. Even shinobi that would usually be on duty allowed themselves time to unwind and join the mass. Some civilians drank sake to their heart's content, some already walking sluggishly, suffering from the after effects of too much alcohol. Music was played all around the village, some good, others horrible, but people couldn't care less. It soon turned dark in Konoha, but people continued to revel, undeterred by time. The street lights illuminated the entire village, providing vibrant colors. Kushina sat on a special table, which was made exclusively for members of the council. She watched kids run around gleefully, she watched couples playing the many games on offer, she watched hammered civilians pass out a few feet from her. She watched all these things dispassionately. "It is not to your liking, Hokage-sama?" Inoichi asked from his seat. No, I have a lot on my mind, that's all." "Well, you don't need to worry about anything now. Celebrate." Kushina looked at the person that spoke, Shikaku. He had a blush on his face, and it seemed like he was having trouble concentrating with the way he swayed back and forth in his seat. He was drunk. Kushina mentally shook her head. What a world. Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. Kushina looked at who called her. It was a man, one eye covered in bandages and using a cane to support his frame. He looked shady, dodgy. He walked to the council table, undaunted. Kushina felt a tug in her mind, warning not to do anything rash. She frowned at him. "Please return to your civilian celebration. This table is strictly for council members only." The man froze mid-stride. He looked at her, bewildered. "I am a council member." Kushina frowned further, she had not been expecting that. She didn't notice him in the last meeting. "Now, Kushina, don't tell me you don't remember me, Danzo." "Of course I remember you." Danzo stared at her for a long time, analyzing her body language. Something wasn't right with her, he could tell, but continued the farce, plastering a grin that didn't suit his face. "That's good to know. Please excuse me while I take my seat on the other side." Kushina nodded, but she didn't say anything else. In fact, if Danzo had looked more closely, he would have seen her apprehension to speak further. Kushina looked around and mentally sighed in relief when she noticed nobody was paying attention to her. That had been too close for comfort. "Hachan." Kushina looked to her side. Mito was in a seat directly next to her. Normally, it would not be allowed, but she was Hokage now, and things were different. "Yes, Mito-chan." "Where is Sarutobi Jiji?" "He said he needed to rest." "He's at his home." "Oh, I hope he's okay." Kushina rolled her eyes. "You worry too much, little one." "I can't help it." Mito protested. Kushina shook her head. "You're just too nigh. Get away from here, demon." Kushina's head whipped to the voice. It was a man. He had in his one hand an empty sake bottle. He was looming over a child. At least, that's what Kushina could tell. She squinted her eyes to focus, and they widened. The boy's head was bowed, blonde hair covering his eyes. His dry lips were partially parted. He just stood still. "You think you can dig in my bins and get away with it?" the drunken man slurred. Naruto didn't move. He knew if he did, the man could give chase. In doing so, the man could discover where he lived. No, he couldn't move. He couldn't let them take away his necessities. He needed to wait. "Did you not hear me, you piece of shit?" the man demanded. Naruto's heart was beating erratically. This was for the best. He had dealt with drunkards before. It was best to do nothing, to wait for the opportune moment. He felt like kicking himself from getting caught, but he had been curious about the celebration. A moment ago, he had been sleeping in his box, then he heard music. He woke to lights and laughter. He was surprised that people were taking this whole Hokage thing so seriously. It seemed like there were a lot of things going on, and he had been inquisitive to know more. At first, he snuck where he could, trying to see what activities were held. He saw many things, but one stood out. Toys, the vendors were literally giving them to every child in the village. He saw stand owners calling kids over and handing them dolls, bowls, action figures, masks, and paddles. He always wanted a ball, and those masks looked so beautiful and enticing. He never felt them before, he never knew their texture, how smooth they were, the secrets behind putting them on. His 7-year-old mind couldn't help itself. He wanted a mask, terribly. So he snuck around some more, hiding in places he was sure people wouldn't catch him until he saw his prize in plain view. There were masks thrown away. They were in bins, but were pretty close to the festival. He tried to dissuade himself from going further, his survival instincts kept screaming at him to run away, hide in his home, and wait for another day, but he just couldn't help himself. He dashed to the bins, both in desperation and trepidation. He had to take a mask and then run. That was the plan, but he had gotten caught in his haste. "I'm talking to you, demon." The man bellowed, raising his bottle in the air. Naruto closed his eyes. He hated this. He hated how powerless he felt against all of them. He hated how he still thought of her, the woman that took his heart and tore it apart without mercy. He hated how these moments made him want to run to her, to beg her to take him back, to tell her that he'll be good, as long as she loved him. He stood there, waiting for the strike to his head. He could already taste the blood, and his body shook. The man brought his arm down, aiming squarely for the child's cranium. His movements were swift, and his intentions were clear. He wanted to hurt the child as much as he could. Clap. Naruto heard the sound. He winced, expecting to feel pain at any moment, but he felt nothing. He waited and continued to feel no pain. He slowly opened his eyes. He looked up, eyes widening in disbelief. The red-deeded woman was standing over him, one hand latching to his attacker's wrist. She held him in place, looking at him emotionlessly. "What do you think you're doing?" she questioned tersely. The man blinked a few times and sputtered. "Kushina-sama, please let me deal with this demon." Kushina leveled a glare at the man, which shut him up. "Walk away," she said warningly. The man stared at her in surprise, but nodded in respect and started walking elsewhere. Kushina looked around her. She was surprised to notice that no one seemed to care about the scene. In fact, they acted ignorant of it. The only people that had their attention on her were the council and her daughter. She looked at the council members. Some stared guiltily, others glared at the blonde boy. She really didn't know what to make of it all. She turned to the boy. He was still rooted to the spot. She noticed that he was shaking. It was evidently fear that took over him. "Child," she addressed monotonically, "are you alright?" Naruto didn't say a thing. It had gotten worse. This new Hokage was involved now. She couldn't be trusted. She wanted to hurt him. He shook his head furiously, realizing that he had to get out of this place. He turned around and broke into a sprint, running as fast as his legs could carry. Kushina stared in shock as the blonde ran away from her. Her arm had been raised to reach him, but froze in the air. She watched on as the party continued, staring in disarray. Kushina and her daughter had decided to excuse themselves from the celebration. Hordes of people cheered at her yet again as she left them to their own devices. She knew they wouldn't stop the party just because she left, but she had lost her appetite for it all. They were back in the Namikaze estate. She was currently tucking Mito into bed. "Hachan?" "Yes, little one." "Why did that man try to hurt that boy? Did he do something bad?" Kushina looked at her daughter. The little girl was cluttered and worried. Kushina could understand. She felt the same way to some extent. "I'm not sure, Mito-chan, but I'll get to the bottom of it, okay?" Mito still looked distressed. That big man was a meanie, wasn't he? "Yeah, it sure seemed that way." Mito's frown deepened. "That's not fair. I hope that boy is okay." Kushina didn't reply. She had seen that child before, digging through rubbish bins. She was familiar with what that situation implied. The child was homeless. "Get some sleep, sweetie. We'll talk in the morning." Mito yawned. "Okay, Kachan." Kushina turned off the lights and left the girl's room. She went into her own, going straight to bed and covering herself with a blanket. The weather had suddenly grown colder. She had felt the temperature drop when she was walking with Mito to their home. Her mind strayed to the boy again. If she had to be honest with herself, she couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something to the blonde. She couldn't tell what it was, but every single time she saw him, it felt like she was under a spell. He fascinated her, he plagued her mind constantly. Kushina couldn't fathom the reason for these emotions. When she saw that man raise his bottle to strike the blonde, she wanted nothing more than to rip out the drunkard's arms. Admittedly, she wanted to beat the man. But why? Why did she feel like that? It wasn't as if she gave anyone in this village her time of day. But the boy, what was it about him? She took a breath, calming her troubled mind. Now wasn't the time to think such thoughts. She needed sleep. She would deal with everything the next day. Mito tossed and turned in her bed. She soon sighed in frustration and tore the blankets from her body before swiftly putting them on her again. It was so cold. How could the weather change so fast? This place wasn't what she was used to. She could still hear the soft melody of music in the distance. The village was still into their celebrations and it didn't seem like the weather affected them at all. She thought about many things. Her life, her experiences, and her journey with her Kachan. The blonde. The boy. She had stared in horror as the horrible man screamed at the boy, calling him terrible names. She had seen ground-ups to some terrible things before, but she could not stop becoming immensely upset with that particular man. The boy didn't deserve that. He didn't even look like he was doing anything wrong. That thought made her even more upset. She wanted to help him, but she had been afraid to move, afraid of doing something wrong, but luckily, her Kachan acted out. She had seen homeless children before, and the boy fit the bill. She couldn't help her eyes from saddening. It was these moments that she hated luxury. She always felt guilty for having a better lifestyle, so she never asked for accessories, she never nagged her mother about stuff she wanted. She never acted spoiled. It would be like rubbing salt into fresh wounds if she did that. She stared at her ceiling, her arms and legs outstretched, lost in thought. So much had happened, and so many things were still left unchecked. She lay still, hearing something. It sounded like rustling, with an occasional clink and clank. She had a room that was closest to the gate. Her mother slept a room away. She honed her senses, trying to figure out if there were intruders in the house, but finally comprehended that the sound was coming from outside her home. Was someone out there just by their house? Were the villagers still celebrating? She got out of bed and went to her window. She peeked through. What she saw surprised her greatly. It was dark, but she could see a figure by the front gate, more specifically, at the rubbish bins that she and her Kachan used. She squinted her eyes. She didn't know what was going on, but when she saw a glimpse of yellow hair, she gasped. It was the boy. She watched on, the darkness making things timorously difficult to see. What was he doing? She knew he was homeless, but what could he possibly need that they threw away? She saw him shivering, and she finally understood. The weather was affecting him too. Judging by what the boy was wearing, Mito could only guess how freezing he must have been. He took out some curtains. She saw him wrap the fabric around him and was certain he was looking for warmth. But curtains wouldn't do for anyone. She ran to her closet. She took out the largest blanket she could find. Now, she had to do this carefully. She didn't want to wake her mother. Kachan would worry too much, so she snuck carefully out of her room, making sure to pass her mother's room silently. Once she was sure it was safe, she hurried down the stairs, opened her front door, and was immediately assaulted by the biting cold. She looked at her clothes and realized, to her dismay, she had little to protect herself from the freezing temperatures. Her body shook violently. She folded her hands around her body and grit her teeth. She looked at the blanket. It would provide her warmth, but no, it wasn't for her. Her teeth started chattering. She could see her own breath expelling alarmingly from her mouth. She didn't care. Her face was fixed in determination. She quickly walked to her gate. She analyzed the spaces in between bars. The blanket would fit. If not, then she would force through. She wouldn't dare open the gate itself. Kachan had warned her to keep it closed until she said otherwise. She would at least heed that warning. Once she was close enough to the bars, she softly called out, trying to still her shaking form, "Excuse-me." Naruto's head turned sharply to the voice. He gasped, afraid that he had been caught. He hadn't planned on going out from his shelter, but the weather had been too cold for even newspapers to protect him. He walked around in desperation, looking for anything that could provide him warmth. People were all around. No place was safe for him. He ended up wandering to the Namika's estate, but he hadn't known the owners of the place. The house looked empty. The lights were off, and no one seemed to be home. He took the opportunity to look in bins nearby. He needed anything that provided warmth. After that, he would leave this place in peace. It wasn't as if he was a bad person. Stealing was a necessity that he needed to employ regularly in order to live. He used to feel guilty for it, but then, he felt justified. Now he was caught, and not just by anyone, but the Hokage's daughter. This was 10 times worse than stealing from any villager. The Hokage was respected by everyone, and if villagers were to find out about his actions, they would no doubt behead him on the spot. What about the Hokage herself? She would be furious if she found someone nosing around her house. He hadn't known that it was her house, and that might have cost him his life. He never took his eyes off of the girl. Even if they were separated by a fence, she might still do something to harm him. He did notice that she was shaking a lot, no doubt in anger. He needed to get out of here. He needed. Here. His thought process froze. The girl's hands were outstretched, as if offering him what she held, a blanket. He focused on her more. She looked cold. Was that why she was shaking? But why would she be cold? She had a blanket in her hands. Mito felt her legs trembling as well. She grimaced, the cold affecting her badly. If she continued to stay out of the house, she would get sick and Kachan would be upset. Please take it, she breathed haggardly, looking nervously to her home, and then back. I saw you looking for something to keep yourself warm. I got the biggest one I could find. But Naruto didn't take it. He stared at her, shocked and still fearful. He couldn't do it. She was planning something. He couldn't trust her. Taking that blanket from her could get him killed. Mito looked at him, confused. She didn't understand why he wasn't taking the blanket from her. He seemed hesitant to approach her. She tried to soothe his unease by trying to smile, but the cold couldn't allow her visage to seem genuine. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. She is lying to you. His mind yelled. She could not be trusted. She would hurt him in a heartbeat, he was sure of it. He stared at her coldly. She will not trick him. Kasan tricked him and broke him. She will not break him like Kasan. He took a step back. Mito noticed his apprehension immediately. He was ready to run, but she couldn't let him go without knowing he wouldn't be cold. She had been worried about him. She had to help him any way she could. Wait. It was too late, however. He ran away from her, the darkness providing plenty of cover. He soon disappeared. Mito looked down. She felt her heart lurch. He ran away from her. She was just trying to help. She was reminded of the cold again, it bit harshly into her soft skin. She bit her lip, looking at where the boy had run to. She couldn't see him anymore. She sighed dejectedly, making her way inside in sadness. Kushina continued to peer from her vantage point. She had watched the entire interaction between her daughter and the boy. She had seen behavior like that before. Distrust, it was a common feeling for those who had experienced betrayal, backstabbing. The kid must have been through a lot. If she had been in his shoes, she would have accepted Mito's offer. But she wasn't him, she didn't know exactly what he had been through. But she would find out. Naruto groaned when he felt the morning sun penetrate his box home. The night cold was still lingering in his mind. It was the coldest night of sleep he ever had. He groggily opened his eyes, sleepily making his way out of his makeshift shelter. He looked around. No one was nearby. He couldn't help but be jumpy. He had been discovered not once, but twice. It was worse with the second, he had been afraid that he would wake up and find the Hokage demanding why he trespassed on her home before she killed him, of course. Yesterday was horrible. The sting of hurt turned into a stab at the thought. It was the first time he had heard anyone openly call him a demon. He could feel tears gathering in his eyes, but he could care less. They hated him, they truly hated his guts. He had always known in the back of his mind, but to actually view the animosity for what it was made him feel sick. He didn't feel like doing anything today. His stomach grumbled, forcing him to flinch. He was hungry again, but he had run out of food and he didn't feel like going out and looking for more. He was depressed. What was the point of living here? He had tried to run away from the village, but Anbu would always stop him, forcing him back to his predicament. He looked at his box home. It wouldn't be holding up soon. The cardboard looked like it could fall apart at any moment. Great, he had no other choice but to look for a new one. His face dropped. He didn't care anymore. If he died from starvation or something else, maybe the next life would be better. He made his way to his home again, planning on spending the rest of the day in slumber. So this is where you live. Naruto's heart stopped. He could try to convince himself that he was hearing things, but the voice was too close for comfort and it sounded too real to ignore. He looked behind him and saw the fifth Hokage standing casually a few feet away from him. Her arms were folded together, she stared at him evenly, not giving away her emotions. Naruto yelped in surprise, scrambling to the dead end of the back alley. His eyes bulged. He had been worried that one day this day would come. He didn't plan on alternative action if the moment ever happened. He felt like an animal, trapped, on the brink of being slaughtered. Kushina analyzed the child's behavior carefully. It was the same as before. Fear. His eyes kept darting around, obviously looking for any means of escape. He looked pitiful. I have to admit, Kushina started, staring at every twitch he made, trying to notice any signs that he would bolt. You're very hard to find. I spent the better half of the morning looking for you. No, she had been looking for him. She had actually hunted him down. Naruto wanted to cry. He knew it. That girl must have told her of what he did. She must have told her that he had tried to hurt her too. He had seen people making those excuses before. Now, here he was, at the mercy of the village leader he had yet to know. Oh God, he knew she was going to kill him. Kushina turned her eyes from him, eyeing the box that she was sure acted as his home. My guess is that that's your home, Kushina observed. Naruto mirrored her gesture. So she wanted to take that from him. Let her have it, he would find another soon enough. Kushina looked at him again. She stared at his form, taking note of his filthy clothing. Come with me, Kushina said, walking to the blonde. Naruto pushed his back against the wall when he noticed Kushina's advancement. He put his hands in the air to shield himself from a beating. He could never hope to fight back. She was Hokage, which meant she was more powerful than he could ever be. She grabbed one of his arms, hauling Naruto to his feet. Naruto whimpered in terror, shocked that this was really happening to him. He tried to pull away from the hand holding him, but Kushina squeezed more firmly. Shaky azure eyes stared at the Hokage, dreading the worst. Kushina looked at the child indifferently. He must have thought the worst of her. It was okay, she really wasn't focused on what he thought of her. She started walking away from the alley, dragging Naruto with her. Naruto had to tell himself repeatedly not to hurt her. Hurting the village's leader could pose for something worse than death. He couldn't do that to himself, he had been through enough already. He didn't put up a fight, letting her drag him away from his home. He could only hope that fate would smile on him, just this once. Kushina dragged the reluctant child through the streets of Konoha. A lot of civilians stared at her, most of them were surprised to see their Hokage holding the demon brat, but she didn't look like she cared, so they didn't bother to voice their thoughts. Naruto bowed his head. He didn't want to look into the malicious eyes of the civilians. He knew they would be smiling at his misfortune. He knew they would be snickering at him as he was dragged to his destination. Kushina stopped walking when she spotted what she had been searching for. She turned towards a new direction and started strutting again. Naruto followed her, he could do little else. He just wanted to get it over with. He felt Kushina stop again. "Sit down, boy." Naruto looked up. He saw Kushina seated on a chair and still holding his arm. Food assaulted his senses from all around him. He finally noticed where he was. A restaurant, but not just any restaurant. Ichiraku's. He had passed the place many days on end, smelling the wonderful aroma of different cuisines and hearing joyous laughter. It was a vicinity he never dreamed of ever stepping a foot in. But he was here. "Sitting down," Kushina repeated, more impatiently. Naruto gulped and did as told. Kushina smiled at him. "Good. Welcome to Ichiraku's. What can I get ya?" Kushina looked at the young girl that addressed her. The girl stared back at her, then she turned her gaze on the boy. Kushina saw the girl's eyes turn to pity. So, she wasn't the only sane person around here. "I'd like miso soup please." She took a glance at Naruto. "Bring him ramen." "You got it, Hokage-sama." Their food soon arrived. "Go ahead and eat it all," Kushina said. She started tasting her soup. She looked at Naruto and paused. He was just staring at the food. He looked like he was in a trance. Poison, 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 the mantra ran through his mind. He looked at the food in absolute horror. So the Hokage wanted to kill him by those means, just like Kasan. At first, Kushina didn't understand why Naruto feared the food. Suddenly, she blinked in surprise, realizing her stupidity. "You think it's poisoned?" she queried. Naruto didn't say a thing. That was all the answer she needed. She grabbed the ramen bowl and brought it closer to herself. Naruto looked at her. He was finding anything the woman did more and more alarming. "It's not poisoned, child," Kushina gently said. She took her own chopsticks and took a few strands of noodles into her mouth. She ate it delicately, being mindful to make sure that Naruto was watching her. She swallowed it down and opened her mouth for him to see. "See?" she said, smiling softly. "This food isn't poisoned. I don't think I can be qualified as Hokage if I started killing civilians." Naruto stared at her. He was shocked that she had taken and tasted the food she had offered to him. He was even more shocked that it wasn't poisoned. She proved it. Even so, he never let his guard down, but his stomach had its disagreement. It grumbled, voicing its needs for everyone to hear. Kushina fixed him with a knowing look. "You're hungry, so eat." She gave him the food again, and Naruto stared at it. His mouth watered. He needed to eat something. He cursed himself for his weakness, but the overwhelming smell was just too tempting to ignore. He dug into his meal, using his hands to grab the noodles and shove them into his mouth. Kushina's eyes widened at the child's mannerism. He didn't even grab the chopsticks offered, he just ate like an animal. She decided to let it go, allowing him the time to indulge himself. He had been through a lot. Naruto finished his food and burped. His belly never felt so full and his taste buds never felt so satisfied. He looked around. Every person in the restaurant stared at him in surprise, even the cooks. He thought they were shocked that the demon brat was in such an establishment, but realized that he might have gone overboard with how he ate the food. "Well, you sure have a healthy appetite," Kushina cut through the silence. "Would you like some help?" Naruto frowned at her. Upon noticing his confusion, Kushina clarified, "Would you like more?" Naruto didn't say anything. He didn't know if he should even depend on this woman, but his eyes gave him away. Kushina saw the look and turned to the waitress. "Give him another bowl please, Bam, Hokage-sama. Bam, please give the child another bowl." "Yes ma'am." The second bowl swiftly came. "Go on, little one, eat up," Kushina coaxed, continuing to eat her own bowl of miso. Naruto paused and stared at the food again. He didn't move, never made an attempt to eat it. Kushina rolled her eyes. The child obviously had major trust issues. She took the bowl, took a morsel of noodles, and ate them. She swallowed and opened her mouth again. "No poison," she promised. Naruto happily accepted the meal after that. Kushina watched him eat in rapt interest. She would need to do a thorough investigation on the child. This whole poison thing was alarming in itself. Sarutobi would be just the right person to start. She cleared her throat. "I want to make one thing clear." Naruto turned his gaze to her, but continued eating. "My daughter, Mito, meant no harm to you." She saw him freeze on the spot and continued. "She's very caring towards people, even if they are strangers. She's far too innocent for her own good. She's a good girl and would never harm anyone." She looked Naruto in the eye. "She was worried about you." "Don't listen, it's a lie. That's how they get you. They lower your guard and wait until you're defenseless. Then, they hurt you." Naruto looked away from the redeed. He ate his food much more slowly than before. His face looked troubled, uncertain. Kushina understood his reluctance to accept anything she said without definite proof. Trust was difficult to earn sometimes, especially to those who had their trust shoved back at them with betrayal. It's alright, you don't have to think too much. I just wanted you to know my daughter's intentions. Please, eat to your heart's content. Naruto had never eaten so much in his entire life. He couldn't remember the last time he had food of such quality and quantity. By the time he was done, stacks of plates stood tall on the counter. If I knew how much you were going to eat, I would have been a little more careful with your quantity, but it's fine. Kushina said. She took out money from her purse and paid for the food. She stood up and looked at the boy again. Come. Naruto hesitated. She wasn't holding him this time. He could escape. He looked around and noticed that people were ignoring his very existence. He expected to see angry faces, but why weren't they angry? Because of the Hokage. He shook his hand. Where did that thought come from? It didn't matter. This was his open. Kushina grabbed his hand. She saw him planning, it was written all over his face. She didn't need him running away. Come on, she ordered, dragging the boy with her. Naruto was on the streets again, this time he noticed the stares. Most people stared at him scornfully, others were smiling at him, but it wasn't friendly. His head dropped. He knew it. The Hokage was planning on killing him. She was just waiting for the right moment. He walked on numbly, his mind absent to all that was around him. By the time Kushina stopped, he had to hastily stop himself before he bumped into her. He looked up, expecting an execution ready for him, but that wasn't the case. He was at the park. Families were currently either lounging around or playing together. Naruto frowned. What on earth was going on? Kushina led the blonde to a bench. She took a seat and motioned for the boy to do the same. Naruto did, apprehensive of what the retarded Hokage was planning. This didn't seem normal. She shouldn't be treating him this way unless there was something in it for her. He didn't know what to think. Kushina closed her eyes and took in the fresh breeze. The weather was wonderful. There were no clouds on sight. Naruto looked down, feeling awkward and lost with the situation. This woman's actions made no sense. Why was she doing this to him? Was it to mess up his already tortured mind? Did she get a kick in seeing him like this? Kushina opened her eyes and spoke, listen, I don't know what you've been through. I can tell that it's a lot and it's none of my business, but I hope you remember that I'm your Hokage. Naruto just stared at her. Kushina was nonplussed. I swore an oath to look after this place and everyone in it, you're part of that everyone. It's okay if you don't trust me. Hell, I'm fine with it, but just know this, just like my daughter, I mean you no harm. She didn't know why she was saying these things. The villagers didn't have an effect on her like this one boy she was talking to. She didn't know what compelled her to act when she was towards him. It was confusing to her. These feelings she was experiencing, they didn't make any sense to her. She looked at Naruto and noticed that his eyes were drawn somewhere. She followed his gaze and saw an ice cream cart. It clicked. You want ice cream? Kushina asked, keeping her gaze on the cart. She stood up and started walking. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. Naruto watches her leave him. This was his chance. He could finally make a run for it. His body refused to move. He tried to do it, but it didn't budge. Even when his mind screamed the command, his body had a mind of its own. He couldn't understand why his body wouldn't listen to him, why his senses weren't warning him of usual danger. Here, Kushina said, hand outstretched with an ice cream cone. I didn't know what flavor you wanted, so I kind of went in blind. Naruto looked at the ice cream, and then the Hokage, and then the cone again. Oh, I forgot, Kushina took the cone and licked it, no poison. She handed the ice cream to him and took a seat again. He ate in silence, neither saying anything. Kushina could tell that the child still didn't trust her, but that was fine with her. It will be handled soon enough. She stood up. I have duties to attend to. Don't worry about paying me anything. She started walking away, then her eyes widened. She looked back, noticing the boy's attention was still on her. He was very attentive, she had to admit. What's your name? Naruto's eyes grew at the question. Is that the reason she took him around and gave him food, to get a name out of him? His poor 7-year-old mind couldn't get it. His name meant nothing. Why was she so interested in it? A part of him was nervous in giving the woman anything. Another part of him felt it needed to be done. He felt like he owed her. He didn't like that feeling. Naruto Uzumaki. Kushina looked to the sky, processing the name. Well, I have to admit, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone named Naruto. We share the same last name too. Who knows, maybe we're related. Naruto gaped at the woman. That was not the reply he was expecting. Kushina shook her head and smiled. Perhaps I'm just jumping the gun there. Well, Naruto, I want you to meet me at my home tomorrow. I have news for you, she said, walking away for the second time. Naruto watched the woman leave, even more bewildered than he had ever been. He looked at his ice cream cone. He was so confused. She wanted to see him tomorrow. Why was that? Was she planning something? She's suckering you, don't fall for it. It will be like Ka-san if you do. Naruto scowled. No, he will not be suckered. He will not be used. He dropped the ice cream cone on the ground and stood up. He headed home. He needed to relocate, find a place where no one could possibly discover him. Kushina arrived at the Namika's estate. It was late at night and she felt exhausted. Hokage paperwork was no joke. Hey, Ka-chan. How was your day? Mito questioned brightly, sitting in the lounge and watching television. It was fine, sweetie. How about you? I hope you're not mad at me for keeping you indoors. It's okay, I'm not sure I want to go outside yet. Don't act that way. You need to make friends soon. Mito pouted, I don't need friends. Sure, Kushina said, rolling her eyes. Are we going to cook together now? Kushina nodded happily. Yeah, let's make dinner. Yay, I get to help. Kushina went into the kitchen, followed by an enthusiastic Mito. The mother took out vegetables and pieces of chicken. She took out rice balls from the refrigerator. No, Ka-chan. Mito protested. Let's make our own rice balls. Kushina looked at Mito. Sweetie, we. Ping. Ping. Oh, that's the bell. Someone must be at the gate. Wait a moment, Mito. Kushina went outside and approached the gate. She was surprised that someone actually came to her house. Who would be here this late? Good evening, Hokage-sama. You have mail, a man bowed. Luckily for the mother, he was on the other side of the gate. Kushina nodded her thanks and took the envelope from the man. She went back into her home, tearing the envelope open and taking out a letter. Her eyes looked at the content. She read every detail. Mito, do you know where a quill is? It should be by the dining table, Ka-chan. Thanks, sweetie. Kushina found the quill. She dipped it in ink and wrote on the same letter she had received. She put the letter in a new envelope. She went back outside, noticing the man was still in the process of putting mail in other homes. Hey, she called. The man turned to her. Hokage-sama. Take this to the export box. Mark it as urgent. The man nodded, taking the letter. It will be done, my lady. Thank you, good night. She went back into her home. Ah-chan, are we gonna cook or what? Her daughter whined from the kitchen. I'm coming, Kushina grumbled playfully. She was thinking back to the day's events. She had done a lot of work on her first day as village leader. The council seemed quite satisfied with her efforts. They praised her without a second thought. The village treated her like a queen. To some, this could have been seen as a way of sucking up to the Ritita Uzumaki. It is just, as you said, it would be a Bito-kun. After analyzing all the information, it would seem prudent to form trade with Suna, a council member said. The council were seated in their usual places. Kushina had busied herself with paperwork during the meeting, reading and stamping anything she alleged as worthwhile. She hardly regarded the conversation with her own consent, satisfied with listening mildly as the council continued their banter. I disagree, another said. Suna at the moment has little to offer us when it comes to resources. They are already struggling, as it is with the fundamental well-being of their very own village. Establishing trade with them could prove to be a liability. The hare regarded the member's words, then turned her gaze to their Hokage. What do you think, Hokage-sama? Kushina didn't raise her head to look at them, but she visibly paused her endeavor. She took a second longer, but acted too quick for anyone to pay any mind. This matter does not require my involvement, as of yet. Continue to discuss it amongst yourselves. Amura frowned disapprovingly. This does require your attention. Although we understand that you brought all those papers and books so as not to lose sight of the copious amounts of administration left by Sarutobi, I can't fathom you leaving such an important decision to us so excessively. Kushina casually continued her work, saying indifferently. I said that this matter doesn't require my input as of yet. It does not mean I won't be involved when I see it fit. Amura stared at her for a second and then nodded, seemingly satisfied. As you wish. The hare decided to pick off where the important conversation ended. Back to Suna. It would seem that this isn't as easy as Lightning Country. Sum nodded her head. You're right. But in any case, I vote against forming an alliance with the Sand Village. Why is that? For reasons already pointed out. They do not have the resources that would satisfy and ensure our development. If we establish trade with them, then that would mean we would need to share our products and services. From the way I'm looking at it, they'll benefit more from this than Konoha. The hare nodded in agreement. It was a factual point that the Leaf Village had more to offer than sand. But, Shikaku chimed in, establishing a treaty and subsequent trade network could give us an advantage on villages such as Kumo. We will have access to more willing shinobi in both the tactical and medical directorates. It would increase our productivity and safety tenfold. Remember, they have a weapon that could become extremely beneficial if we ever needed it. It immediately dawned on most of what Shikaku was talking about. I see, Mibuyuki said. You mean the Sand Jinchuriki. Shikaku nodded. Tsume clicked her tongue. It is a plausible price for an alliance. Adding our Jinchuriki to the mix would probably give us more power than we can handle. Kushina stopped reading a scroll and stared at the council members. They had her attention now. Yes, but there is still the problem of outweighed value. There is still very little to count when you think about two villages sharing valuable intel and merchandise. Weigh the positives from the negatives. Everyone turned to the person who had spoken, Kushina. Kushina cupped the side of her face with a hand, donning a bored, negligent posture. If you compare the good from the bad in earnest, then you can come to a solution of what choice is the right to make. You're already there, just simplify it. Okay, Inoichi said slowly, I guess the bad would be they have little resources to trade, meaning we would have little to get. The plus, Shikaku continued, would be that they have a lot of shinobi who can offer us support. Furthermore, they have a Jinchuriki. Combining those two aspects creates a powerful prospect. Kushina nodded, anything else? The council exchanged glances, admittedly having nothing more to think of. Well, nothing major. I think those are the most important issues. Kushina nodded again, then the decision was easy to make. Taking account that Suna has never been openly hostile towards us, I propose we form an alliance with them. At first, some members seemed to disagree. But after thinking it over, they really didn't know if it was wise to doubt the woman that had so much power over them. They murmured amongst each other, occasionally glancing back at their Hokage. Kushina stared back in disinterest. After a few minutes, the council made their decision. You're most wise, Hokage-sama. We agree to allow trade between us and Sunagakur. Then that problem has been solved. The hare nodded, brimming a smile. Quite easily, in fact. You're sure living up to our expectations. I should hope so. Now, about the subject of the Jinchuriki of this village. The hare blinked at her. What about the child? I have not been given so much as an explanation on his activities or his whereabouts. Amura frowned in confusion. Oh, I thought Sarutobi would have told you by now. He has not. The hare took a pause to think. It's strange. He had been adamant to tell you himself, although we couldn't understand why. It wasn't as if the kid was important. Kushina furrowed her brows, but said nothing. Well, reports have indicated that he lives off the streets now, Tsume said. That's the first time I'm hearing about this. Wasn't he adopted? Inoichi asked, perturbed. He was, Kaharu said. But you're already aware that no person can ever harbor such a child under them without a motive. It is clear that there was. It's not as if the situation with the boy should be taken with too much care, a member put out. He is just a Jinchuriki, a weapon. Yes, you're right, Kaharu said. The only importance he wields is his value to us through Minato's sacrifice, nothing more. Kushina continued to listen patiently. It seemed that they had momentarily forgotten about her, but she didn't mind. They were talking. That's all she cared about. The hare finally addressed the Hokage apologetically. I am truly sorry that he shares your last name. But whether we like it or not, he was discovered as Naruto Uzumaki by Sarutobi himself. We cannot change it, unfortunately. Kushina didn't hear them. Her mind stopped the moment she heard Naruto's name mentioned. Her eyes were slightly wide, realization hitting harder than she understood. The hare saw the look and explained, it's exactly what you're thinking. The blonde boy at the celebration is him. Kushina mentally berated herself for the shock, wondering what had come over her. She looked at the old woman and spoke softly, I see. That was him. That's how this village treated Jinchuriki, that's how every village most likely treated Jinchuriki, as nothing more than tools for their use and disposal. Meeting adjourned, Kushina said suddenly, standing up and taking the paperwork with her. Before she went on her way, she eyed 2 empty seats. I noticed those seats have been vacant ever since my arrival. The hare followed her gaze and said, of course, the Uchiha and Hyuga clan are on undisclosed retreats. They should be back in a few days. Uchiha. The hare stared at the Hokage worriedly. Her statement was odd. That will be all, Kushina said, promptly leaving before anyone could converse with her. Iridite arrived home in record time. The council meeting had been very early in the morning. It had to be due to its importance. Currently, it was close to 8 in the morning. Kushina made her way past the gate of her estate, making sure to lock it in transit. She briefly saw an array of color flash from the gate itself. It must be the seal. She went inside, taking off her robes and setting them on a coat hanger. Now clad in a white and red kimono, she strutted into the kitchen. She took out utensils to prepare sustenance. She decided to make a nice eatable breakfast for herself and Mito. She took out a pan and cooking oil. Carelessly pouring the liquid content on the pan, she let it heat up while taking out some eggs and bacon. She looked to her side and retrieved bread from the bread bin. It was an easy and quick breakfast to make. Bacon, eggs, juice, and toast. She mentally gave herself a pat on the back. Mito would approve. Ah-chan, Mito yawned, coming into the kitchen in her pajamas. Her form was anything but presentable. But since she wasn't doing anything in particular, she could care less. Morning, little Kushina cooked. Are you ready to eat? You made breakfast without. You're helping me, yes. Like I said before, Mito, I'm your Ka-chan. Yeah, I know. Come on, Kushina motioned. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Kushina decided it was the right moment to strike up a conversation. How old are you, Mito? With a mouthful of food, Mito could only chew out a muffled 7. Kushina chuckled. Don't talk with your mouth full, sweetie. Anyway, I think it's time to start your training. Mito blinked at her mother. Training? Yes, I recently came across this. Kushina took out a little journal from her sleeve, handing it delicately to her daughter. Mito looked at the cover. Finding it strange, she looked at her mother. Shinobi Code 101? Yes, little one. While doing paperwork, I read up a few things. I found this journal. Actually, I found 2 that looked exactly the same. She took out another identical small book. What's it about? In order for you to learn to be a kunoichi, you need to understand the basics, from chakra to manipulation. Mito's eyes lit up. This will help me become a kunoichi. That's right. Read first, and then we can start with other stuff. It was helpful for me to look at it, too. I'm assuming this was Minato's work. Mito grinned at her mother. Thanks, Ka-chan. I can't wait to start learning kunoichi stuff. Kushina smiled at her. My pleasure. Mito jumped out of her chair and cheered triumphantly. I'll do my best. That's good to hear. Hey Ka-chan. Yes. Do you think that one day, I'll be as strong as a Bidonai? Don't say that name here. Kushina hissed, cutting the little reed off. Mito squeaked at her mother's outburst. Her face was confused for a moment, then she comprehended. Oh sorry Ka-chan. Did I. Kushina was hugging her in the next second. SHH, it's okay. Just be careful. You must never say that name here. I understand. Mito softly said. Okay. Kushina let go of her. I have a few things to do today. Will you be okay without me? I'll be fine, Ka-chan. Be careful. I will. Lock the gate and don't let anyone in. Okay. Naruto stared ahead of him. Out there was the village. He was still hidden in the alley. He looked around. The box that he originally called home had withered to pieces. He had to get another one, but luckily, there had been no disputes. No one had stalked him down or even discovered his location. He remembered what the Hokage had said to him yesterday. She requested that he met her at her home. But there was no way in hell he was doing that. She had a motive. He knew she had a motive. And he suspected that she had treated him so nicely the other day as a means to lower his guard and strike. She didn't care about him. Why would she? Even if she was the Hokage, what value did he have towards her? He was homeless, filthy, and obviously alienated. She was up to something, and that something involved hurting him. Ka-san, his sweet Ka-san. Even now he could still remember her face. The smile she gave every time he did something wrong and apologized, the warm comfort of her hugs every time he felt down, her constant declaration of love even when he wondered why she would bother. How could he forget about that? That was just it, she was impossible to forget. And with that revelation came the bitter reality that it had all been a lie, a way to lower his guard and literally stab him in the back. It was the same with Kushina. He knew her game. She was waiting patiently, just like Ka-san. She was waiting for the moment to strike, and it seemed it could be any time he let her in his heart. No, he couldn't stand that, not again. So it was safe to say that he wasn't going to see her today. In fact, he had planned on finding a new location to hide from prying eyes. But alas, he could not. No matter how he thought about it, it never ended well for him. His current location was the best possible place when it came to safety. No one bothered coming inside, afraid that the place might be cursed, and that stuck in his favor. Unfortunately for him, Kushina knew where he lived. There was no doubt that she would be back, but whether it was to kill him or offer him something, he couldn't know. He just hoped, no, he prayed that she would just give him a day. He just needed one day to reflect. Only then could he possibly face her more steadily. I thought I told you to come to my house today. Were you planning on staying here? Naruto mentally sulked. It seemed fate couldn't care less about his worries. He looked up, noticing the woman in front of him. She had a frown plastered on her face. But she didn't look angry, more annoyed than anything else. He just stood there, staring blankly at the Hokage, hoping above all hope that she would just leave him alone. Kushina eyed the boy in front of her. It had the same look as yesterday. He obviously didn't want her near him. She strongly suspected that it had something to do with his past. From what she was able to gather, the blonde had been adopted. So what happened? Deciding to focus on the current problem, she fixed a stern look to the kid. I know you don't trust me, Naruto, but I'm not your enemy here. There's a reason I called you to my home. I can understand why you didn't come, but I'm a little irritated by your lack of faith. Naruto's eyes were wide. It felt unusual hearing his name come out of the woman's lips. She had said it so cleanly, no malice, no mirth. He had already gotten used to the demon, but hearing his name uttered on another's lips brought on a strange feeling. He shook his head, warding off thoughts of the other person who used to say his name like that. Kushina raised an eyebrow. I don't think I asked you a question. Whatever. Are you going to come with me willingly, or do I have to grab you like yesterday? Naruto grimaced, struggling to gulp down the lump in his throat. He knew it. She came to take him away. Maybe it was for real this time. Would you come willingly, Naruto? Kushina asked, softer than before. Naruto didn't think it was his place to answer. Why bother denying the all-so-powerful Hokage? He nodded his head. No, I need to hear you say it. Naruto looked back at the woman. She had a frown that looked worried. He didn't know what to make of that, but right now, it didn't matter. Yes. Kushina beamed at him, surprising him greatly. Great, now come along. She walked graciously out of the alleyway, and Naruto begrudgingly followed. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with any village judgment. It wouldn't help to stare back at them, since they all hated his guts. Now he had to truly wonder where he was being led to. Yesterday had been a bit of a surprise. It was the first time anyone had ever treated him to food, as fake as it was. This day could end up the same way, or worse. Death. It wasn't looking like a bad way to go these days. His life had been horrid from the start, and although he had survived and prevailed for so long, wasn't death the gateway to a better place? Wasn't there somewhere he could live in peace and not be treated like a dirty dog? His childish mind couldn't make a consensus, so he pouted, following the Hokage's feet. No small talk was exchanged, and Naruto was already used to Kushina's silence. So it came as a surprise when the mother did actually speak up. We're here. Naruto looked up so fast that he resembled a bobblehead. What greeted his eyes was another unexpected view. Kushina turned her attention to the surprised blonde and offered a little smile. It took some time, asking around, looking from place to place, negotiating deposits, but I guess I can be proud of my one-day effort. Naruto regarded the redeed, silently asking what she was talking about. Kushina saw the face and immediately picked up on the confusion. Oh, of course you must be lost. She looked back at the building that stood in front of her. It was a modest complex, with quite a few lined rooms. It seemed recently painted in a light orange shade. The windows of each section looked brand new or replaced, but that was just the outside. I was told it was recently built for retired or off-duty shinobi and kunoichi veterans, and since I could hardly find a place that wasn't already full, I figured this place would be at least suitable for you. Come on, let's check the inside, Kushina said, already moving. Naruto was perplexed with what Kushina was saying. He couldn't grasp it, no matter how much his mind was pointing strongly to implications that shouldn't be there. It shocked him, while walking inside and staring at the beautiful furniture and decor, that he was still alive. This certainly wasn't the sort of place to kill a child, it looked too lavish unless there was a secret room to kill demons. The pair climbed up a flight of stairs. Once they reached the intended floor, they made a right and passed 6 rooms. Kushina stopped at the 7th, and Naruto had to halt himself or risk bumping into the Hokage. He followed her gaze and noticed the door that was in their way. Room 305, he murmured, never noticing he said it out loud. Kushina actually heard him. You can read. Naruto flinched at her surprised tone, fearfully deciding to keep silent. The tad wavered, Kushina returned her attention to the door. Well, Naruto, it's not much, but I hope you appreciate it. The Hokage opened the door. Inside the apartment room were boxes of furniture and unpacked foods. In the middle of the room was a woman with long raven hair, wearing a black kimono and shinobi sandals in the process of unpacking a few boxes. Aisai, Kushina called. The woman jumped, turned around, and hurriedly bowed. Gee, good morning to you, Hokage-sama. Good morning, Kushina nodded. Aisai took a brief look at Naruto. The blonde saw the woman's eyes flash, and then she got back to work unpacking. Naruto couldn't tell what that look meant, but his instincts were already warning him of danger. Aisai is my assistant, Kushina said. I asked her to be involved in helping you adjust to shelter. You are the first to be treated to free housing, child. If it works out better than I expected, I think I'll turn this entire complex into a shelter for the homeless. The Namikaze woman specifically chose her words. She didn't want to give any indication of false implications, such as harmful intentions to the boy. Using words such as program or experiment could probably set Naruto off the wrong way. She'd already seen how jumpy he could get. It was better leaving him a little confused than giving him bad ideas. Aisai was another story on her own. Kushina sighed and shook her head, remembering what a chore it was getting the woman involved yesterday. Aisai had refused to cooperate vehemently. It shocked Kushina when she witnessed the woman show such animosity and fear when she mentioned Naruto. That was before she found out that the blonde boy was the Jinchuriki. But Kushina had to force her hand. Aisai had graduated with high colors in the medical field. Her expertise in counseling was revered by a lot of people. But it seemed her youth, she was only 20, was inhibiting her ability to act professionally. Kushina honestly considered casting the woman aside as a candidate, but no one else was best suited. However, she would need to keep a close eye on her. Aisai, I have company, Kushina said, her rebuking tone causing Aisai to jump again. The woman quickly turned around. My apologies, Hokage-sama. Good morning to you, Naruto-san. Naruto stood rigid. What was this? Why were these two women calling him by name? What happened to the demon? Were they ill-informed? Naruto, she greeted you, Kushina informed, expectantly looking at him. Naruto had no clue why Kushina was telling him the obvious. He stared back at her, his expression blank. Kushina shook her head. The boy had serious trust issues, very serious. She shouldn't have expected much, aside from the fact that he could read. You must greet her back. It's only polite, Kushina said. Naruto's eyes widened. He had forgotten. He looked at Aisai and squeaked out a greeting. Aisai was shocked with how scared Naruto looked. It was like he feared being punished. No, he was just hiding his true colors. This was the demon that killed her brother. There was no way those scared azure eyes were genuine. She would put that aside for now, however. If she even thought about harming him, she was sure Kushina would make her pay dearly. The Hokage seemed to have an odd attachment towards the blonde, and Aisai couldn't discern what the Hokage was thinking. She would have thought the entire idea ridiculous if there wasn't a catch to it. What do you think, Naruto? Do you like the room? Kushina asked the youngster casually. Naruto stared at her inanely. He couldn't grasp what Kushina was aiming at. Why was she asking him if he liked the room? What did it matter if he did? He looked at the area again. It was quite spacious, more than what he was used to anyway. It didn't seem too confined. Well, anything was better than his own home. He didn't quite understand why his opinion mattered. He wasn't stupid in thinking that Kushina didn't have a motive for asking. She could be offering the place to him as a way to temporarily confuse him, and then she would strike. It was a plausible setup. The fact that Aisai was in the room as well should have warranted worry from him, and oh, it did. Should he lie then? Should he say that this place wasn't nice or wasn't suitable? Maybe that's what the Hokage was aiming for in the first place, to confirm that she could treat him just like everyone else. Thinking up too many ifs was making his brain hurt. He didn't know what to do but stared into space. Kushina's arms were folded. She had been observing Naruto's reaction. It wasn't difficult to think that she had given him something arduous to answer to. Because if she was right, then Naruto was downright afraid of her. He didn't know her, but her title as Hokage might have broadened his judgment towards her. How Sarutobi allowed something like this to happen would always escape her. Incompetence. Do you like this place, Naruto? He didn't answer. Kushina massaged her chin. This was turning out to be exceedingly problematic. Communication was key in this case, and if she didn't get an answer, she couldn't act out. Aisai didn't know what to do herself. This was actually the first time she stood in the same room as the demon brat. It wasn't anything she had ever experienced, and she didn't know if it would be wise voicing her thoughts. Aisai, you may go to the tower, Kushina informed suddenly. Aisai's head perked up at the sudden request. She didn't expect Kushina to be kicking her out so quickly, but she welcomed the change. With a quick bow, she left the Uzumaki pair to their own devices. Once Kushina was certain that Aisai was gone completely, she turned back to Naruto. She purposely walked up to him, ignoring his fearful retreat at her advance. Naruto took steps back the moment she took steps forward. Kushina had an odd look on her face that he didn't like. It forced a shiver from his spine. His eyes were wide and dancing around, his heart was beating hard against his chest. He couldn't stop his stiff movements. It was like he was overwhelmed with a sense of hopelessness. When she grabbed his shoulders, he whimpered, shutting his eyes and tightening his body. He had a strong urge to pull away and dash for the exit, but it was difficult with so many negative possibilities. But when she sat down on a sofa and pulled him into a gentle embrace on her lap, that's when he reacted. The warmth, the comfort, her sweet scent overwhelming his sense of smell, it was just too much to handle. The emotional part of his brain reached critical level, and the logical part declared that his feelings were too unstable, so it blared massive warnings, triggering a desperate attempt at self-preservation. He struggled against her hold, fervently, trying to shake his body as hard as he could. He mistakenly hit Kushina a few times, but logic wasn't processed clearly. He just needed to survive. Kushina grimaced when she felt his strong resistance and took the blows to her body like a champ. She had very little idea why she chose such a reckless approach, but it was actually subconscious movement. She had no idea what her body was doing until it was too late. She didn't pull away, however, and held on tighter the more he fought her off. The fear his body was exuding was evoking strong maternal instincts in her own body that usually reacted when something bad happened to Mito. She recalled the time when she first saw him. She remembered how he mesmerized her beyond understanding, how his face forced her into a trance. After that, he never left her mind for too long. But she wondered why that was. She couldn't thoroughly explain it, she didn't know how. Seeing him suffer made her ache a little, and to someone who didn't give any villager her time of day, that little ache was a very strong feeling. It made her want to do things she cogently knew were wrong. For someone in her position, having inconsistencies in rationality was dangerous, but here she was, hugging Naruto as protectively as she would her own daughter. He struggled for some time, flailing his arms and legs about like his life depended on it. Well, in a sensible interpretation, it did. After some time, that adrenaline pumping in his veins vanished completely. He was utterly spent, even laying his head on Kushina's shoulder to catch his breath. Kushina never lost her cool for a second. She let him do as he wished. It was easier now that he exhausted himself. It meant that he was much calmer to deal with. Putting strange thoughts entering her subconscious aside, she leaned back on the sofa, breathing softly. "Do you like this place, Naruto?" she asked quietly, waiting patiently for his reaction. Naruto nodded his head. He felt too weak to argue. He was slowly losing all sense of reality from the woman's hold. It was so much more placating than Kasan. It felt too good to pull away. The betrayed part of him tried its damned best to fight off the unwelcoming feeling. But the lonely boy, looking for anyone to give him attention and security, never felt as safe as this moment. "Good. From now on, this will be your home," Kushina announced, a bit surprised she didn't get any refusals. The fact that Isai would be also staying with him didn't seem like a topic to bring up yet. No, now that she thought about it, this opportunity gave her a very appealing idea. Since she was treating him to free housing, she might as well go all the way. She strongly wanted to. She looked down, eyeing his blonde hair. "Have you ever thought of being a shinobi?" There was a pause, but Naruto hesitantly raised his head. He tried and failed to keep eye contact, feeling slightly drowsy. Kushina noticed his fatigue immediately and decided to cut to the chase. "If you become a shinobi, you can protect yourself from those who want to harm you. You can buy things and live alone if you want. You'll be strong enough to make a huge difference in your life. You could even become Hokage one day." His drowsiness temporarily forgotten, he stared at her with eyes so wide they looked like they were going to pop out. Hokage. That was actually possible for him. No one had ever told him of such a thing. Was she lying to him? "Everything I said is the truth." She read his mind like an open book. "You could be a great leader for this village. Then, people wouldn't treat you like this. He would be free. They would actually accept him." He knew being Hokage was a big thing, but he never thought it was this big. But wait, why lead these people? What had they done to deserve that out of him? Being Hokage sounded like an easy way out of being treated like shit, but could he really live with himself if he gave these people the power to take everything they did to him and cast it aside like an afterthought? No, they hurt him terribly. Being Hokage would be like selling himself off to the wolves that bit his hands off. Getting revenge wasn't something he would entertain either. For all her wrongdoings, Kasan was a great mother until she tore everything they had apart. "Revenge is never good," she said. And from all of Sarutobi's talking with kids, it solidified that belief. So no revenge, but he didn't want to settle for less. Being a shinobi was a powerful prospect, he knew that quite well. So being the strongest shinobi was the best way to go. Why was he even thinking these things? He shouldn't be trusting anyone with his life, especially the fearful Hokage. Like he recalled, she definitely had a motive for everything she was doing. Nothing in this world was for free. He had to learn the awful truth the hard way. There was no way Kushina didn't expect something from him. But he was way too tired to figure it out. His eyes felt heavy. And for some reason, his instincts weren't warning him to run away. Maybe it was the way she stroked his back, or maybe it was the scent of roses he smelled in the space nearest to her. But in any case, he was too tired to do anything. Kushina carefully took out a book. She put it on the table next to them. When she looked at Naruto again, she noticed his eyes closed, breathing even, and movements relaxed. She truly tried, but she couldn't stop herself from smiling at the sight. This kid had a weird effect on her, one she struggled to canonize. She gently put him on the sofa. She stood up and decided to leave, it was getting late. She would visit him the next day. There was no doubt in her mind that he would try to make a break for it once he realized that Isai was going to be sharing the same living quarters. He just needs time to adjust. She knew how difficult that was going to be. He was one person who was struggling extensively with emotional connection. The barrier in front of him could be considered something like a brick wall, breaking through would require hitting it at its weaknesses. It absolutely had to be done. The dangers of his resentment as a Jinchuriki could very well affect Konoha's existence. That plus her mind was curiously pressuring her to do it. She sighed to herself. Until tomorrow, she had bigger issues to deal with as Hokage. See you soon, little one. As the door closed, Naruto's sleep seemed undaunted. For the first time his body melted into comfortable fabric. The soft feel was effective enough to keep him in slumber, and he napped. His head rested on a pillow directly against the arm of the sofa. The arm was candidly next to the table. On the table lay a piece of Minato's work, one of the two things he left behind, most probably for his own children. Shinobi Code 101. The end. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description, see you next time, till then sayonara.